what the committee worked on today, so that they can look it over.
Lisa, an extra copy that you have around people to look at. Hi, Rob.
I gave you a
Let's call the meeting to order, get started. Welcome our guests here. Debbie will take the roll call. And if we need, everybody is here. No. We have the minutes of the meeting of April 17th, and in addition, on the April 10th meeting, and the minutes of the March 26th and 27th public hearings that were submitted to you a week ago for approval. Do you wish them read?
Red? No. I move for approval, Mr. Chairman. Second.
Second for approval of the minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, order. Item 4 on our agenda is appearance requests. We certainly want to welcome you folks here who have requested to appear regarding aspects of community council. I do want to say that Dan Zantek called me this afternoon, said he favors an advisory community council. Said he was unable to be here tonight. And Pat Parnell called and said that he unfortunately was tied up because of a car problem, would not be able to be here tonight. Is Susan Ruddy here?
Yes, I am. I made it.
We do welcome any comments you may have on the aspects of the community council.
Okay, thank you very much. I feel like I'm talking to a very friendly group. I think most of you know a great deal about community councils already and probably do favor them. I don't know that, but I assume that. I've already submitted some testimony to you on community councils, and I'm only going to take a few minutes. I was going to give you some historical background about how they've evolved in other parts of the country and things like that, but I don't really think that's necessary. I think probably most of you already know a good part of that. I just want to make one point, one thing that I feel very strongly about. I think that the article that you have before you tonight is a very good one. And the reason I think it's very good is because it makes it possible for the legislative body to decide what kinds of powers it will share or will not share with community councils. I think Eagle River is a very good case in point in this particular instance. I always had the feeling when I was working at the borough that Eagle River was sort of a stepchild. People would come in and they'd say, but people from Eagle River would come in and say, but we're not even on the map. When you show people the Anchorage borough, you don't even show us on the map. And I think that a good part of the reason behind their move to secede from the borough was because they felt that they didn't have any control over the events in their own community. And I think they were willing to pay quite a price for that. Look at how high their taxes would have been or may be if they moved even from the borough. Each individual person out there was willing to pay quite a price in order to have control over the events in his own community. This is why I think that including the option for the legislative body to share some powers with community councils is very important. I think that had we had that option a couple of years ago, we probably would not have had as strong a movement on the part of Eagle River as you separate from the Anchorage Borough. That's one thing that I feel very strongly about in the article that you have before you tonight. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions?
Yeah, I'd like to ask Susan a question. The borough recognizes some community councils now. There's 3 in operation, I believe.
There are 3 in operation right now, and about 3 more about to go to the assembly, as I understand it.
Okay, if we've got all this real grassroots representation type of thing, which you get through the community council, it's very obvious you would, then how would you relate your representation to that? In other words, if you had a multi-district or a single-member district, how would that relate to that community council?
I don't think they have to be related, because I think the community councils would establish their own boundaries. I think they should establish their own boundaries. And I think that they would evolve on lines very different from the assembly and portion boundaries. But I don't think the representation is really an issue in community councils.
Would there be a relation at all between?
I don't see one.
You don't see one.
No, I don't.
They may relate to the assembly as a whole.
Yeah, right.
They will relate.
Josephson?
You refer to the article before you. Are you referring to
Yeah.
that?
That.
Any other questions? Bill?
Or the area you deal with, Susan.
I live in Trinity.
Mr. Chairman, I might just point out for Fred and for Bill whether that was implied in what you raised. The City Council has now passed an ordinance for the council also. There's been a demand for it. And the ones that we have presently in existence are really there by referring matters that affect their neighborhood. They're given an opportunity to know ahead of time of issues that are coming up that they may wish to comment on. They're very much an advisory status. However, community councils and certainly could get more information in some areas are granted powers far beyond that. The way this is written provides a great deal of flexibility to future legislative bodies to adjust what that community council will be.
Chairman, can I speak to that gentleman? The reason I brought the question up, something just flashed across my mind, and that is...
In neon?
Right, great neon. But here, you know...
Like Las Vegas?
Right. You have the representative of that district who possibly can't get to all the people. And suddenly I see a very good arm here for that representative, for that district. I mean, if he isn't doing his job, the community council can bounce him on the head and vice versa. If he needs information, he's got all these hands working for him. So I see a very nice tie-in between representation and the community council. That's what prompted my question to you. Because it's really providing representative of that district a lot of tentacles which ordinarily he wouldn't
Well, I
have.
think that would be true regardless of whether the community council boundaries are coterminous with assembly district boundaries. I think the same thing would apply. Sure.
Well, I didn't get into boundaries because I don't know what the powers and boundaries are of the community council, whether they can set their own or what.
Well, under our present ordinance, they can set their own.
Sherry?
I think this, Fred, ties in very nicely with what the Roland Group has been telling us through our surveys about that people want government to be effective and relate to their particular needs, be more personal and closer to the people. This is why they've been telling us about the single-member districts, and this is another
Beautiful
aspect.
tying with the multi-member district.
Yeah.
You could reduce your time in your sessions very quickly through this arrangement.
So Mr. Chair,
all I want to make sure, and this probably says it, and I haven't really read it over several times, but except that I think the amount of input that a community council could provide would be good, used properly, and used wrongly could be very wrong and very detrimental to a council or to an assembly. I think that if it's structured properly and meant right, that the input to the assembly would be good. I think that if you write it so that it's so strong that it interferes with the assembly's work, can't do its work, then it's wrong. I think it has to be done properly. I would imagine everyone here would agree with that.
Question to the drafting subcommittee and anyone else who wants to respond. Have you considered language that would provide a specific function, among others, related to the comprehensive plan, which I know has been done elsewhere?
In one of the first drafts, that's about the 10th. Then the other one, this one here is about the 11th. I had it divided up where community councils would have certain rights, where they would have the right to participate with all land use planning, social, economical aspects, which would relate to comprehensive plan that goes into the general. And then cutting two further drafts, cut it out and shortened it. And if there was a comprehensive plan, I would think that the community council would work very well with it. And if they felt that the comprehensive plan was wrong, they would say so. And that didn't reflect their community's feelings, they would say so.
Sherry?
Chairman, I think the intent of this draft, Joe, is to leave it up to the assembly to decide the roles of the community council specifically. And this would allow flexibility, perhaps from one community council to another, depending upon the location of the community council.
Mr. Chairman? You have 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 community councils, which you very well could have under this system, or 20 or 30. Then that could take the place of single-member districts.
Margaret?
Yes, it could. Yeah. Yes, it could. It could.
Not necessarily. Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Chairman?
Lisa has the floor.
Mr. Chairman, presently, there is a community council that wants to be recognized by the Borough Assembly. It has a total number of 44 people within it. 44. And that's not a single-member district. A community council could be as large or small as it wanted to be, depending on what that community council wanted to do. But then the others that are in existence are the Turnagain Arm. The Turnagain Arm thinks they're too big because people in Indian think they're different from the people in Girdwood, and they feel that there should be an Indian community council and a Girdwood community council. And then there's South Edition and Government Hill. Scenic Park is in the process of forming their community council.
Well, isn't the child supposed to avoid sectionalism and get into unification?
Mr. Chairman.
This isn't sectionalism because you're not breaking it down and saying there will be a community council here, there will be a community council here. You're leaving it up to the people and to the legislative body to decide.
Can I respond to that?
Let's get back to the appearance request. So these folks each have their say, and we'll get into discussion probably a little later in the evening. Ms. Fleischer?
Do you need me to introduce myself? I'm Lainey Fleischer, and I am in the business of working to help communities form community councils. I thought I would come in case you had some questions about some of the background and some of the things that I've been finding in talking to communities. We are working with the ordinance that was first passed by the borough in August, and a very similar one that has now been passed unanimously by the city council, by the borough assembly. I thought I brought just a few things to show you that this is becoming, this is not the first community in this country that's thinking about having a two-tiered form of government. The League of Women Voters did a survey showing of over 26 areas of the country, and they have a really good book that I recommend to those of you that want to pursue this more in depth, called Super City Hometown USA, and they found that the idea of a two-tier government, which is not exactly what we're talking about. It's somewhat, this concept is the same, the idea of an overall regional government, and then having neighborhood participation or some form of participation at the neighborhood level, whether it's formal or informal, is accepted in a lot of communities and thought by many to be probably the ideal form of urban government. I'm not going to go through this now. I just thought I'd let you know this was available. It deals with two things. First, the idea and the problems of regional government, which is what you're dealing with, the unification. In other words, the same thing as unification. Then it deals with the community-based programs and how this has been carried out, always differently, and every community is slightly different. Every community, of course, is an individual, and it's worked out individually across the country. But then they also have a section on what they call the ideal urban government. And it's a very thorough survey that was done, and they found that the overall impression of most people, including mayors, legislators, councilmen, citizen activists, and so on, was the two-tier form of government would probably satisfy most needs. The need, as we see it here, for an overall unified approach, but still giving people some say-so over what happens to them in their neighborhoods, those things that affect them in their neighborhoods. One of the points that I wanted to make is that I think you have a pretty good indication here that this is really, that community councils, or the idea of having some say-so at the neighborhood level, is really important to people in this community. We not only have the Mayor's Advisory Group experience of 2 years ago, and I know a lot of you were on that, so I really hardly need to tell you about that. Now to that came the goals and objectives on the comprehensive plan. I just thought I'd show this to those of you who may not have seen it, although I hope that there's anyone here who hasn't read the goals and objectives. But the organizational goal, and looking right at a lot of people who helped draft this organizational goal, came out, the second half of the sentence is to provide for citizen participation in the planning process at the neighborhood level. And under that were two objectives, and I would just point to F and G, both of which speak to community councils, really, but don't call it that. G says bring government decision-making to the neighborhood level. Now, the group went out to the neighborhoods all over Anchorage, and of course the feedback we got was really positive. In fact, if you saw this, which I assume you have also, the Citizen Speaks Out, because a lot of people talk about government and what it means to them. But in the front of this, they summarize the main things that were stated in every community in this city was that the majority of the communities, in fact, I read through it and looked it up, and it was stated in every meeting, is that government should be more responsive to citizens, and people wanted more citizen voice in government. So I thought I'd point that out. I have a lot of input already on this whole idea, but I think you can point to the Rowan survey, which has already been mentioned, shows that people really care about having some say-so and some power. And the League of Women Voters' position on local government has long been, and it's very clearly stated, not only that they believe in well-defined channels for citizen input and review, but the League testified in public hearing for the Community Council this July when it came before Borough Assembly. And if you need any more than that, I just thought I would tell you that my empirical evidence has been talking to people in the community. Not only are they really excited, far more than I thought they would be, over the idea of community councils, but there are two things specifically that they care about. It really seems to turn them on, and I was surprised to find this. The girls' ordinance does something that people like a lot. In fact, the thing they like the most about it so far. It allows them to set their own boundaries, to determine their own community. And that's the thing that really matters to people, you know. In fact, you wouldn't believe how often people read this ordinance and they say, you mean we can determine our own community? And they keep looking at it, and they'll ask me 3 times, you mean we really can set our own community, our own boundaries? I mean, if we determine this is our neighborhood, then that's what we can go in and say. You know, and I said, it says right there, that's what you can do. And I think that means the most to people. I really do. And I don't think you have to be afraid of too much proliferation, because the whole idea is to deal with people as individuals. And you have the same number of individuals, whether they're grouped in some small groups or large groups or a mixed of both. Therefore, to cut a long story short, I really favor the article, at least as I read it, that you have before you, because it's basically very broad enabling legislation, or would act that way, and it would not tie people down. You're not going to set up districts and say, okay, you have to be here. I noticed that Joe had written in his shall instead of may.
I didn't,
Someone wrote that?
That's not necessary, I think, because it's the second sentence makes it mandatory.
Okay, shall provide for, right. I was going to say, the only thing that I would worry about the shall is that, you don't want the legislative body to be in a position where they're going in and setting up community councils, because it has to come from the community system.
No,
Yeah, okay. And then if you have any questions, if I can help you with it. Oh, there was one other thing that people like, and that is that there is no structure set up for them. They really like being able to decide whether they're going to have a formal community council with a formal structure with a board of directors, the whole thing, or if they can be informal. And that's important to them, too. Yeah. Oh, did you?
Lisa?
Is there a connection between single-member districts and community councils?
No, in fact, I definitely think there shouldn't be, because then you're in a position, if you're talking about setting up districts and saying, okay, here's a single-member district, and that shall be a community council district. No, I don't think that would work.
Parsons?
Lanny, how long, two-tier questions, how long is the history of this movement?
You had me ask for that, because I don't know the answer to it. I think it goes pretty far back in some communities, and other communities are really going through the works right now, trying to get the regional government established. I think we're pretty lucky now to be doing it at this stage.
And I was curious, are there some negative aspects that have come to light? If there's enough history background.
On the two-tier?
No, my question is two-tier. This is the second part
Okay,
of the thing.
second.
I was wondering if there's enough history of community councils so that you see there has been some negative feedback about.
Oh, on community councils themselves or neighborhood governments themselves. I don't know if it comes out of history or not, but the way this book is written, which is typical of the League's approach, they gave advantages and disadvantages, both of the regional approach, the neighborhood-based approach, and then the two-tiered approach. The disadvantage given that people saw for the community-based programs is that it slows the policy-making process. And then there was another very interesting disadvantage, which is stated that it raises citizens' expectations, which cannot sometimes be met. And then they went on to say this is often due to the personalities of the people involved in the way that the government does or does not follow through with their word. And I think that's something that
You made mention that they can set their own boundaries. Is there a control on this so you don't have overlapping boundaries or boundaries spread all over?
Oh, yeah.
Who exercises that control?
The Borough Assembly and the City Council. There couldn't conceive of overlapping boundaries. However, there were a community where two groups came in and said, we want to be the representatives of this community. Then the borough would have to make the decision as to which one they saw as the community council for that.
Thank you. Fisher?
Help Jim out to brag a bit. I proposed community councils in Anchorage in 1964, the Borough Assembly.
How come you weren't lynched?
Go ahead. They didn't buy. I don't know. Lots of ideas I had they didn't buy. One of the disadvantages and a disadvantage that this borough's had is that the lack of participation, really. That's changing a little bit, fortunately, but we've had problems with that in the past.
Yeah, we of course haven't got to the point where people are beginning to slow down or become disinterested.
Good.
Right now what I get is a lot of feedback from people saying, well, if I have some say-so over what's going to happen, then I want to have it. And a lot of people say first, well, it doesn't matter what I say, so I'm not going to bother. Then they look at the ordinance and they get lost in
Mr. Chairman, may I reappear again? Having made my appearance, may I reappear in response to Jim's question?
Momentarily.
Very briefly. Jim, as I understand it, in the early part of this century, the urban reformers and political scientists were trying to really centralize government to do away with the Tammany halls and the inefficiencies of overlapping governments, and they succeeded pretty well. That movement is still continuing, obviously. But at the same time, they found that they were creating quite a distance between the neighborhoods and their city halls. And one of the results of this was that people felt that they were losing control over the kinds of things that were happening in their own communities. So about a decade ago, all over the country, urban areas began to look at this kind of decentralization. New York City, for instance, got involved in it about 10 years ago. The disadvantage that they found at that time was that all of these bodies were advisory for the most part. And since then, because they found that a disadvantage, they've been moving towards bodies which had some powers. The disadvantage was that the advisory bodies became very disinterested very shortly because they found they didn't have any more control than they had originally. Thank you very much.
Right, sure. I have just a small point that is related to this that I wanted to add, thinking that you might not have caught it. We are called the Anchorage Action Council, the board that is formulating the community council to make that important. The point that I would like to bring up, and I would like to read from the original proposal that went in on the community council. It says to help increase the ability of volunteer agencies and policymakers to communicate and deliver services to local residents, or in other words, to make greater use of the volunteer agencies that we now have and to help them better communicate with the public and the government makers and service delivery organizations in order to increase the efficiency and effectiveness. We're now communicating with the University of Alaska, with Dr. Haynes and Carrie Belden, and also with the governor's office on this area. We're hoping that the University of Alaska will take over the recruiting and the training of the volunteers and assigning volunteers. Sort of like a volunteer bureau type of a thing. This isn't anything that is new in the country. This has been done at several other universities and colleges. And we are getting material from them on this. But I'm bringing this point up because it might give you a broader scope and perspective to something else that community councils or the action council does besides just the community council. and that's my only point in bringing it up, because I think that's important and something that is needed in Anchorage.
Any of the commission members have further comments or questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mary?
Barbara, do you think it is something that needs to be spoken to in the charter?
I'm not sure if you need to, if it is written in our, in our bylaws or in our formation of the Action Council that we deal with it. I don't know if you need to explain to me. It hadn't even occurred to me. I think it might be worth a thought. I wouldn't want to miscount it.
I'm not quite, well, I will admit that I wasn't quite sure the gist of what you wanted us to understand about this, the volunteerism sort of thing.
Just that it's to broaden your scope of what we do. That you might not be aware that this is something that we also do besides the community council.
Okay.
I think that part of the point is that the community councils are not just governmental. I mean, that
No.
you don't have to look at this merely as it's a little bit more broad-based. The idea is a real community, or something that would help develop a sense of community so people feel they really belong someplace, whether or not they're involved in the government itself. Would we see the community council as something that can reach people in their neighborhoods on an individual basis as well? Well, something for everyone, sort of.
Well, I think that part of this combination between the volunteerism and the community council is developing out my way, between the community council and the community schools.
Yes.
I mean, we don't have a formal community council, but we do. The HALO organization is the community council, in fact, though not declared, and there's a very heavy cross tie between it and the community schools.
You take this and go.
Certainly wish to thank you, ladies, for being here. And I think that Tony Knowles, Pat Parnell were going to be here, but apparently they're not. Pat did call and say he was involved with a car problem and would not be able to make it. We have asked Mr. Fisher, Vic Fisher, to be here tonight, and he is here. I appreciate somehow we didn't get him on the agenda, but that's where he belongs. Thank you. We certainly appreciate your being here, Vic.
Thank you, Frank.
It's been a problem for you to make a connection.
I very much appreciate being invited to meet with the commission. I followed your work as closely as one can with the lousy coverage that you've been getting in the press. But I'm particularly glad I'm here tonight, even though Fred called me, I think, almost 2 months ago on this, or more than a month anyway. Because I'm very interested in community councils. I think that they're really very important, primarily from the standpoint of sort of the overall concept of where government is and where government ought to be going, particularly at the local, regional level. As you know, I was involved in quite deeply involved in setting up the local government article of the state constitution. And essentially when we were struggling with the borough concept at that time, we were up against a problem very similar to what you're up against now with respect to community councils. You may have a book here, and we have all sorts of books on how counties don't work and sort of how things, sort of what's wrong with government, with urban government and so on. And there were ideas expressed during the Constitutional Convention to do away with cities altogether and let's just have neat regional government and so on. And that even at that time there was a feeling that you can't just do away with sort of the most local government. And at the same time, when when the Constitution was being written 20 years ago, there was a feeling that one had to provide for some kind of a regional structure, and fortunately, boroughs was decided on. And it was put into the Constitution.
I think the word was on.
Pardon me?
It was on, wasn't it?
I said unfortunately.
Yeah.
That was one of the great controversies during the convention. But sort of a concept was developed. There was no attempt really to define specifically what the borough was to be and so on. Unfortunately, what happened subsequently, as many of you know, was that nothing was done to pursue the definition. And if I may just tie directly into what the preceding speakers dealt with, one of the problems was that no one defined it. There was no thought given to what the boundaries of boroughs, of these regional units ought to be. And as a result, we have a horrendous hodgepodge of regional government of boroughs in Alaska today, with a no man's land covering most of Alaska called the unorganized borough. And therefore, with all due respect to Lenny and the enthusiasm of people for drawing their own boundaries, I personally would suggest that, again, you don't have to write this in, but I sure would make it very clear that it is not necessarily a basic tenet of the concept of community council that each person draws his or her own boundaries, because you're liable to have a horrendous mess and end up with a structure that is as messy as what we have statewide in Alaska today. The other thing is that, again, in the community council concept, is that there's a tremendous amount to be said for it, both in terms of operation of government. You've got to think of Anchorage not just of what it is today, but of 15, 20 years hence, when the population would be 3 times as great, and the borough government, in terms of employment, present trends continuing, might be 10 times as great. And you will truly have big government in operation here. And the bigger it gets, the less relationship there is between sort of this government over 500,000 or more people that you will have here at that time, and the people living in all of these areas. Now, it's all very well fine to think in terms of citizen groups and associations and so on, groups of people coming together and doing sort of whatever comes naturally at that given point in time. I think that you ought to think in terms of going much further than that, of establishing a principle that whatever is not of regional significance, what doesn't affect people in other communities and other neighborhoods, ought to be dealt with at the neighborhood, at the community level, and actually delegate to the people at each level not just the authority, but actually the responsibility and the power to deal with their own affairs. And I could give you various examples in the area of zoning where things of that can be dealt with. I think sort of from the operational standpoint, I think, looking 10, 20 years ahead, this is going to be very important to still have a democratically functioning system in the Anchorage area. The other aspect, of course, is what was also referred to here, is essentially the concept of what people want, that people do want. a more responsive government. And I think that when it comes to selling the charter of sort of convincing people that you have got something worthwhile, the community council concept can be the vehicle if properly developed. If it doesn't look like something that a few special interests here and there can take advantage of, as a prime means of bringing government sort of, if not back to the people, home to the people where more of it belongs. I don't want to talk too long. I have sort of lots of ideas and things. I think that from what I've gathered, your general concept is to have a brief, concise charter, which I think is very critical, both in terms of, again, operations, in terms of future flexibility, and in terms of getting across to the people. And I think that this always has to be kept in mind, that you're dealing not with something sort of an academic abstraction, you're just in this beautiful environment looking out over the hills, but something that you have to take back to the people. And from what I gather, you're off on a good course. And again, drawing sort of a parallel with the Constitutional Convention, one of the things that was very definitely a basic principle there was that in that case, the three branches of government, the executive, judicial, and the legislative, are each to be sort of effective, strong, and responsive in their own right. It wasn't a question of which one was to be dominant, but the attempt was to make each one as strong and effective as possible and still responsive and build in all of those checks and balances. Again, I have not seen enough of sort of what's in your minds. I've only seen the things that you've acted on, which seem to have been a more easy thing that you could deal with today. But
That's a good diagnosis.
But I think this is important. It's important when you deal with the executive to have a branch there that can really function. Also legislative. I gather, if not from your draft, from what I've read in the paper, that the thought is to sort of have a twin-level election system. This again is something that we considered for statewide purposes for the legislature, and it was actually used for election to the Constitutional Convention, as essentially was here. It was abandoned because there are a lot of disadvantages. I think that one particular disadvantage in your case is that you've got to weigh the sort of balance the size of assembly that you will have with sort of maximum direct representation of people, and you get the maximum direct representation of people by taking whatever number you have in terms of membership on the assembly, and having that many districts throughout the area so that the districts are as small as possible, where people can vote as directly as possible for these individuals. And by having 3 at-large seats, essentially you dilute the direct impact of the vote of the people over sort of the area as a whole. And it's again, it's a matter of in part a philosophical question, but I think also well, it's a philosophical question, period, because it really amounts to sort of providing for maximum direct, closest democracy by having, as you might say, as few people as possible vote for each representative, in this case, each assemblyman. I don't know what you're doing with respect to the power of taxation. The earlier charter that was voted on, that was drafted here, had a very good section, the first sentence of taxation, essentially taking onto the borough, the combined government, full power of taxation. And the only proviso being that in case of a sales tax, it has to go before the vote of the people. The area of taxation has essentially not really been tested yet in Alaska. The Constitution leaves taxation really wide open. It gives the authority to local governments to tax. The legislature has not really directly infringed in any significant manner on the power of home rule municipalities to tax. Someday there may be some conflicts between the legislature and home rule governments, but certainly until that comes along, even at that time, what you need to do is to protect to the maximum extent possible the authority of your government to tax in behalf of its own people, whether it's taxing oil companies or pipe yards, or taxing dogs, or railroad cars, or whatever it may be. And I think that sort of one across-the-board statement, as was in the previous charter, was essentially a very, very good approach. I'll just briefly cover a couple of points. I noticed reference to service areas in one of the drafts that has been acted on. If you go to the community council route, hopefully this comes that way. Community councils having jurisdiction over local services can be pursued rather than this monstrous service area system that is developed here in Anchorage. In other parts of Alaska, service areas are no more significant in their operation functionally and politically than your sort of special local improvement or assessment districts are in Anchorage. You know, you do something, some people participate, and essentially that's all there is to it. You don't want service areas to become essentially a third, fourth branch of government. The only other general thing I'd like to just mention is that sort of the whole strategy of the charter writing process and the charter adoption process. As I mentioned in the beginning, I'm just flabbergasted by the lack of attention that this group has gotten, and I don't quite understand why this should be. If the media don't cover you, I would sort of think that at the very least you'd take a few of the dollars you have, or get some more dollars, and just hire somebody to write, not flack, not sales pitches, but sort of hire a good bona fide objective reporter, somebody who can cover for you and put the information on AP Wire, where you pick up at the radio and TV stations and the newspapers, or just hand it out to them directly with a very direct, factual way. It seems to me that this will become particularly critical when it comes to voter consideration of the charter, subsequent hearings, and so on. People can't just be given something. Again, thinking back to the Constitutional Convention, the coverage at that time was phenomenal. Of course, that was part of the statehood movement. There was more to it than just writing a Constitution. It was part of the sort of a mass drive for statehood. But at that point, there was enough going on, as I'm sure there's enough going on here, both in terms of new ideas and controversy, to make some damn good copy. And there was good coverage, and it was front-page news just about every day that the convention met. This is one thing. The other is sort of the importance of thinking about ratification of the charter. Again, looking back at my experience then, as well as just sort of generally around the fringes of the political arena, you have got to think in terms of a continuing process that started a long time ago, that has got to be pushed along rising above controversy. One of the things that, and I might come back and talk to you about sort of ratification strategy when the time comes. One of the things that we, I think, did fairly effectively, we refused to debate the charter itself. It just like, I guess motherhood is debatable these days. It's a sin, but so we took the attitude that statehood was right, that the Constitution was the best damn Constitution that any group of representative Alaskans could write, and that it really wasn't debatable. And we would go on radio and TV and so on and discuss it. We would go on forums with. We refused to go on a one-to-one basis, one person for and one against, because the implication immediately was that the pros and cons are equally divided. And anyway, as I say, I could just go on. I don't want to take your time. You've got important business.
Vic, I really appreciate your comments. I think you've given us a lot of meat. I wonder if you'd mind, I didn't quite understand what you were saying on service areas, as to how other areas were differing from us, and what our problem might be. Just if I could, a couple of examples. For instance, rather than perhaps going area-wide on police, to create within the new government an area that would be composed of Spenard and the city for the ones that have police power. And at additional time, as people wish to add on, they could, by popular vote, receive that service. Do you see that as an improper way to go?
No, okay, that's one way you can go. You can establish service areas and have services rendered and people, property owners or whatever, taxed accordingly, or assessments levied, or however you want to finance the service. What I was talking about was primarily my reaction to what's been happening around here.
The multiplicity of service areas.
Right. But the other thing is that, and Rick might correct me on that, my understanding is that there is nothing to prevent us under the current system to provide differential services and differential taxes without differential taxation. That you could say that, without formally establishing service areas, that you could have, so as part of your budget, as part of your overall program, say, okay, these services are in this area and taxes are levied accordingly, without necessarily sort of establishing formal service areas.
I think the answer is no, isn't Rick?
I'm not really sure, Vic. I can't think offhand of where that sort of arrangement is provided for. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
This issue has come up a couple of times in connection with annexation, where you don't have to establish separate service areas, but you can provide for differential taxation, step annexation, and so on.
Mr. Chairman, along that line, what is the apart from the aesthetics or lack of aesthetics and proliferation, what is the disadvantage of the service area?
I would say in Anchorage it's been more than anything else of a politicization of the populations in connection with service areas, expanding service areas, contracting them, Spenard, 30, and so on. It doesn't have to be any disadvantage. It can simply be a line drawn in a map. It can simply be an instrument or something in a computer. So long as it doesn't become, as I said, a fourth branch of government. It doesn't have to be, I agree.
If the community council concept were implemented in a strong way, it would tend to detract from the service area as a political entity.
Right. Well, it could. And I would certainly, this is why I mentioned it in the context, essentially, of community councils. I would certainly think that you have to withdraw from sort of major treatment service areas. Another thing, of course, is that each community council, each community could be defined as a service area also, within which you could have certain jurisdiction granted, to a group which you recognize as a politically responsible group, and then they essentially have a political level below the consolidated area-wide government.
Have you any thoughts about, Mr. Jai?
Vic, do you have any comments on the management form of government that should be taken?
Well, my personal preference, and I arrived at this after many years of experience working as planning for the city of Anchorage and sort of senior council manager form and strong mayor form. My experience was that the council manager form was generally, you might say, more efficient but less responsive to the people. For instance, if traditionally in Anchorage, and I won't comment on how it is now because I haven't been that close to it, the manager could last year after year after year with total lack of responsiveness to the community, to the city of Anchorage, because no one was elected on the basis or on the record of city performance. Councilmen had 2 3-year terms, 2 elected each year in those days, and none of them were individually responsible for what was happening in the city. The majority was never up for election. There was no one person who fully represented the city, so that you could not really affect the policy change. You couldn't throw the rascals out. You couldn't get at the administration itself. So that no matter what level of dissatisfaction it was, there was a problem with it. So that I have over the years come around from being a very strong advocate of the strong council manager form, being very much in favor of an elected chief executive, backed up, of course, by a highly professional staff.
You changed your mind with George Shannon.
No, as a matter of fact, George Shannon and I spent much time discussing it, and George isn't here to defend himself, but long years after George left Anchorage, he and I discussed it, and I think that George essentially had come around to that point of view.
I'd like to turn you to another subject, and that is education. You mentioned projecting Anchorage that would be 10 or 15 years from now. There's already some concern that the school district is too large, that there's no accountability because there's no way that a school superintendent can follow the reports of his principals in all of these schools. Have you any feeling as to school boards structuring and the feasibility of the district serving a borough that is 3 times the population of a single district? How do you, is that that you haven't thought about?
Well,
I don't want to think about it, you haven't thought about it.
I have to take it. I thought about it. In the first place, I really believe very strongly that education is but one function of general government. And as such, I'm not particularly sympathetic to the independence of education that is essentially protected in here. At the same time, being a political realist, occasionally anyway, I don't think that you can do very much about it. I think that you're right that what you're implying or you're pointing to is going to be a problem as time goes on, that the educational system will get so large that it won't be quite as bad as New York City, but in New York it simply doesn't function anymore, and they have been trying to go to community level, they've had all sorts of problems. I'm not sure where the sort of breakdowns. I don't think it's a 200,000 yet to a 400,000, but beyond that, one may well want to subdivide.
Well, could maybe the ladies present on the community council that you indicated, their research elsewhere shows that there's community council involvement in education, in educational policy.
It's in here. I was just looking it up. One of the examples they use, one of the cities has gone to neighborhood level school boards. In fact, they divided the community into, I think it was 7 districts. I thought it was Indianapolis, but a quick glance it says it wasn't Indianapolis. I can't find it right now, but then the school board in that particular city, each community elects its own school board, and then the school board selects out of each school board selects area-wide representatives. There is also a regional school board, but policy is determined at the neighborhood level. I have thought that left to develop naturally, and I don't disagree entirely with what was said, but left to develop naturally, that probably the elementary school district would be a very natural breakdown of communities. The center, the school, elementary school will serve naturally the center of each community, and that eventually one of the things communities very much want to do is have say-so over school policy in their neighborhood school, and we might get to a more local level.
Sure.
Just one follow-up thought on that, Lenny. Being interested in the community schools concept. You get the community schools, the community councils, and the running of the schools all tied up into one bundle if you have them approximately serving that same neighborhood elementary unit of each.
I think that's what would happen. I would say that some people still might want to hold out for the right to split away, say, from their community school. Like the South Edition has one little section of it that is part of the South Edition community's Inlet View School District, but it's splitting off in its own little community council. Not that they're disagreeing, they wish to work together. They have a very specific little area, that's Elderberry Park area over in, and they're in the Central Business District. And they wish to have a strong, separate voice because of that fact. But I think generally the will form the center of most districts.
I'm certainly glad we had this discussion because I think it's important that we get in the minutes for the assembly to look at, or the legislative body to look at the future that we mean, the Charter Commission means for community councils to be advisory to the school board as well as the Borough Assembly. I'd like to continue and get on to something that Dick was saying about services. I heard an inconsistency, Dick, and I don't.
I've been accused of that.
Well, no, I don't think you said the inconsistency, but I want to clarify it. Something concerns me about. It concerns me that we tie community councils to services. They've got to be tied to services in light of what kind of services will be and the way services will be administered in a specific area. But tying them to the level of service disturbs me, and I think that the proliferation of the, and I very much agree with you, the proliferation of the service areas as we've seen it in Anchorage is a disaster and unnecessary. And it should be done more on the basis of administering a service, as you've already pointed out. And then it seems to me you said something about the community councils getting involved in that in some way. And, you know, it concerns me very much that a service area could be established in a specific smaller area to administer a service of a much higher quality than was available to the rest of the people in the community. And this is something I want us to avoid. I think that's very undemocratic, and we could get it. Right now, you know, Anchorage is a community of, well, it's an unstructured community in terms of where the wealthy people live and the poor people live, generally speaking, compared to most communities. And I think you can support me on that, Vic, from your studies as local government across the nation. And I think we've got to do everything we can to retain that. I think if we ended up with all the wealthy people living in the mountains and forming their own service area and providing high-level service there, and the poor people living down in Muldoon providing much lower-level service, it could be a disaster for this community. And I think we have to, so this is my little talk, but you didn't mean that. Service.
No.
Okay.
Carlos?
Vic, we could probably keep you all night, and that's not fair. We'll never get all our other things done. But what about terms? Do you have any hang-up on that? Do you feel you should limit the length of time that a person, either a mayor or assembly or council, could serve? Do you think that there's some magic to a 2-year term as opposed to a 3-year term?
My feeling is that if you have single-member districts, which I personally favor, that you probably ought to have 2-year terms, because you've got that again increases responsiveness. But I wouldn't necessarily, I wouldn't limit the term of a councilman or assemblyman to 2 terms or 3 terms, anything of that sort, because assuming the individual is up for re-election often enough, the people get a crack at the individual. And especially so long as the population doesn't get too great, it still is close enough a relationship that people will know how the individual is performing. At the area-wide level, I don't know what term you propose for the mayor or whatever the chief executive or whatever the chief area-wide elective officer is. But at the state level, we have an 8-year limit, essentially. I think there's value to a limit. I don't think it's critical, though. I don't particularly feel too strongly that, I'm not sure, say if you have 3-year terms, that 6 years is the maximum term that a mayor could serve, or whether 9-year would be more appropriate, or 12, or like Mayor Curley for life. I hope we don't get a Mayor Curley again. Daily. That's right. Curley did it too long ago.
Well, you got him in jail.
They gave him life too.
Take care.
Mr. Fisher, I understand your concern about multiple districts where the government is furnishing the service to each of them, supposedly at a different level. We discovered, in fact, that though we were having different mill levies, that the amount of difference in the service that they were getting in the so-called different service areas was actually not truly reflected. What would you say to, like we presently have, where we have the one service in one service district that is furnished by the government, but my vision of the service areas that the community councils might wish to service is where it wasn't the general government providing the service. They might wish to contract for it with other parties rather than contracting with the government. If they contracted with the general government to furnish that service, then I think they would have to accept the level that the general government was furnishing for that service, though they would have an input as to what that level should be, along with everybody else that was accepting the general government's furnishing of the service. But I see no harm if, say, Eagle River wants to furnish its own road improvement on contract, not with the general government, but with some private contractor or even an association that they might form themselves.
Right. This is essentially the way service areas are run in Fairbanks. You can have a service area contract with anyone, design the sort of system yourself, determine exactly what you want to do in the area. Let me say that in terms of community councils, my concept goes far beyond sort of the routine provision of services.
So does mine.
It seems to me that, for instance, there are many things that we do as a general government which goes far beyond what affects the area as a whole. You know, whether the sidewalks in a given area is really of no concern to anyone except the people in that particular area. Many zoning issues are strictly of local concern. And let me give you one example specifically in zoning. The hearings that the Planning Commission held a year or so ago indicated that many of the neighborhoods and communities essentially didn't want any more people living in the area. You know, so the status quo was preferred. They didn't want to increase densities and so on. At the same time, we all know that the area is growing, that population is going to double in the next 10 years or so, maybe less, and that people will have to be put someplace, and the choice isn't so much Anchorage, whether Anchorage grows or not. It's a statewide phenomenon. Now, so that the area-wide concern is that someplace these people be accommodated, and that from the area-wide standpoint, you sort of need to take a look, the government needs to take a look at where people can best be put. Now, for instance, you might conceptualize that, say, in the Muldoon area, which, just using hypothetical figures, I have no idea what the population is, but say that 8,000 people in there now, that in the future, somehow or other, taking into account area-wide carrying capacity and so on, 12,000 people may have to be in there. Now, it really is a very little concern to the people who live down on Clack Road or someplace, whether those people will live in apartment houses or whether on small lot subdivisions or whether you have a concentrated development and lots of open park space around, or whether you just carve the whole area up into half-acre lots. And many of those decisions in terms of the implementation of broad policy could best be left, should be left to the people in the local area.
I'm going to let Lisa complete, and then I'll go one question around to anybody. We do have quite a bit on the agenda, and unless the commission as a whole feels it's imperative to continue, I think we best get on with it. We do have some reconsideration items that are being reconsidered on the basis of the full commission being present.
I'll try to
we have a full commission tonight.
I'll try to be brief in any responses I can.
Lisa?
I was wondering what you felt. It was proposed a couple of weeks ago on the ballot that we, aside from the charter that we put on there, how the people felt wanted to be represented, and we put on there multi-member districts and single-member districts for the map. Do you think that would be confusing to people, or you think it's good, or it's bad, or what?
I'm not sure that that particular example necessarily is good or bad. I think that it is very appropriate to give people choices. I think that, for instance, the people were asked during the initial referendum in the poll, do you favor the manager form or a strong mayor and so on. I think that it would be very feasible, and this has been done in quite a few areas with state constitutions, to give people an option, essentially write sort of Article 2A and 2B and put it before the voters, which do you prefer? And I think, there are, again, two advantages here. Number one, you let the people make the decisions. Secondly, people who feel strongly about one or the other will not necessarily vote against the charter because you haven't given them a chance, or you have not included their particular option. They're liable to vote for 2A and for the whole charter. or for 2B and for the whole charter, rather than saying, if you didn't include 2A, to hell with the charter and against it.
How would you explain, if you were to explain it, how would you explain the charter?
I would explain the charter by saying this system of government that we have designed can function with either one of these systems. And as part of our democratic process, it's up to voters to decide under which of these two forms they want to operate.
Jim?
Vic, you've been around long enough to see where Mountain View is separate and where we have the unique situation of the city of Glen Elks with 7 people, and it may have certain kind of protectiveness about it that gave it a quality that gave it strength too. And I don't want to take that away from if Eagle River remains with it or Girdwood remains with it. My own background is New York City, which was so totally impersonal that you had no concept of neighborhood, not knowing the people on the block, but also Columbus, which had enclaves of cities within cities kind of thing, which was awkward, but allowed to keep some uniqueness for capital city that was surrounded by Columbus and some other areas. This happened over and over again. How do you reconcile these kind of things and still allow people to keep what is for them a community within a larger community?
Well, I think, again, that the community council concept is a step toward that. Let Eagle River, Chugach, assuming they're part of the overall municipality, have their own identity in one or more pieces and run their own affairs insofar as possible and insofar as it doesn't interfere with the interests of the area as a whole. And I think if you find it in most instances, what is done there will not have a too great impact on the rest of the area.
Just a little bit further,
which doesn't take care of the 7 people who run the house.
Yeah, or for example, if Girdwood wants to have if they find they have no power within that neighborhood, as I think the comment was made, interest is lost. That the things lose their effectiveness, kind of thing. And I don't want that to happen, and nor do I want them on the level of power that they're competing with X number of other governments.
But Jim, this is part of my thought behind going the community council concept all the way and giving them actual power. This is why I said the power to zone, for instance, in most instances could be at the local level. There are lots of other decisions that can be made at the local level, street improvements and an awful lot of things. And I would give the point of schools was raised. I agree in principle. There's a lot to be said for decentralization of school decision making.
This is not on Vic particularly, but I'd like to respond to something he said. But and in one way that there's precedent for giving voters a choice in this area, beginning with the establishment of the borough here, when there was a choice between first and second class borough, and there was a choice between the type of executive we wanted, a manager form or elected mayor form. And that was a clear choice at that time. There wasn't a problem in describing what a borough was at that time with those multiple choices.
Other questions? We want to thank Mr. Fisher for being here and for taking the time and the energy and to be with us and give his knowledge. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, we have unfinished business before us.
Abby?
Before I go on, I want to give thank you, ladies, for being here, expressing your interest.
They're all important.
Here, you look fine.
Thank you.
So Rowan is the only one who didn't get.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a parliamentary inquiry under the item of unfinished business?
Yes.
As I read the minutes of April 23, we did act on the issue of the executive at minutes page 33, when Mr. Sheffield asked that there be a reconsideration, and I gave notice of reconsideration, and the group agreed that question of the executive would be taken up when we had 11 members present. But with respect to the districting matter, there was no notice of reconsideration given that I find in the minutes.
24 hours is allowed according to Robert's rules for reconsideration, and the next day it was given.
Is that in the minutes of April 24?
What about Roberts?
Mr. Chairman, Joe, I gave notice the next night for reconsideration.
Do you have a page? Is that?
She did it. That's all right.
Oh, it's on page 6, Joe.
Pardon?
Page 6.
On page 1?
40. Oh,
At the center of the page, you can see the district treatment for next week. I'm sorry, I didn't have any record of action taken. I don't know if it has to be voted. It was, so I mean, it was in the slide rule.
I think the matter can be reached by a motion to rescind, but I think that's the proper procedure.
What, you can't move to reconsider it?
I can't. My experience, and Mr. Parsons apparently is that the reconsideration should be given at the same meeting when the action is taken.
Mr. Chairman, technically, well, Robert's rules, and I just looked at it tonight, but not on this. My interest was how much we could consider, and it states there before the end of the next succeeding, I believe they use the word business day, and I don't think we've ever determined just what that would be for this, but they do allow a 24-hour period of time, and I think the assembly construes it at a particular time before 5 o'clock or something. No, it should take a second. And
We take 24 hours, and we call Mary sometimes up to the last minute.
Mr. Chairman, could I submit that it take the same number of votes, whether it was a motion to rescind or a motion to reconsider, and it's academic? Right. Well, it's not academic, and it doesn't take the same vote, as a matter of fact.
Well,
sure, because a motion to rescind would require an affirmative action of 6, whereas a reconsideration would come up automatically, and the same proposition being reconsidered would take up 6. There's a difference.
I'll refer to my parliamentary.
I'm sorry I didn't get Joe's point.
Well, I'm saying that if the person who wants to undo the action makes a motion to rescind, that person has to muster 6 votes in this body. But on the question of reconsideration, the people who sustained the prior action must muster the 6 votes. So it does make a difference whether it's rescinding
Mr.
or...
Chairman, if they're ready to handle the question of reconsideration, it takes an affirmative vote of any 6, and then it brings the matter back. Any 6. It doesn't have to be...
No, I understand, but I think I'm correct.
Well, you're not, but I don't think I want to argue with you because
6 people
I like what you said, Joe.
And we just ask now, can we bring it up for reconsideration, and then we take a vote.
Do we have a book here?
Well,
Do we have a book?
I'll listen really on the chair. I did want to raise the point. I think we ought to get an understanding on this for the future because...
Well, Mr. Chairman, could we get an understanding? Do you feel that it was improper to to make a motion for reconsideration?
I'm speaking from a disadvantage because my parliamentary experience more recently was with Mason's manual, but in Mason's manual you would have had to do it the night the action was taken.
Definitely Robert's Rules does provide for the following day. But I wondered if there was another issue. That's the issue, as to whether you can give it the next succeeding day.
And then if not, or if we go by Robert's Rules, we need an understanding as to what we mean by the next day. For example, if we had not had a meeting on April 24 but on April 25th, would it have been understood that that was the next business day, or would it have had to, the notice had to be given to our headquarters by the close of that working day? I think we need to know what the problem is.
This is not covered in our rules.
No, it's something that, would you want me to draft something to come back to the commission for? Okay.
Come up for reconsideration until the first draft. That's why.
Well, that's true. The second draft process in itself is a reconsideration.
I'll draft something for the next day. Great for me.
Well,
I'm afraid
I think
what I was familiar with.
Yeah,
the basic
things.
feeling, chair's basic feeling is that there was a consensus for reconsideration of those items that are presented on the agenda. The form of government, effective districting, and contingent upon the presence of the full commission. The chair would entertain a motion to reconsider the proper.
No, I'd like to get the parliamentarians' advice on this. My understanding is that on the executive article, no motion is necessary. The question is again taken on the same proposition that was passed before.
Mr. Chairman, two votes are necessary. One is to actually vote whether or not to reconsider, one, the item of the executive, two, the item of the districting. If that passes with 6 votes, then you have before you the motion that was last voted upon for, amendment, substitution, etc. Now that's the procedure that
Okay.
Robert.
No. That's where our 6-vote confusion came up, and I can explain where I was.
I think the confusion is in some terminology we've been using. We've been saying that there was a motion to reconsider made at the last meeting. There was a notice
That's right.
given of intent to.
My understanding, if I can pursue this, was that if you give the notice in a timely way, you don't have to go through that first procedure. Is that not?
Well, Mr. Chairman, according to Robert's rules, you vote on it. Now, I'd like to defer to Mary by common practice that we've used in local government. That's the way you handle it, is it not? And I can only speak to that and to Robert's rules. If you do vote to reconsider, you need your 6 votes. Then it is brought back exactly as it was last voted upon as amended.
The distinction here is that the practice Mr. Parsons and I were following was one and that came up when Mr. Sheffield made his application, that as a courtesy, if you gave a timely notice, you automatically had the right to reconsider. And I would vote in any case, if that's the procedure, to allow people to be re-recorded on those issues.
I have no objection to if timely notice is given to definitely allow reconsideration and re-voting. I sure don't have a hang-up on that. I really think that it is unfair ever not to reconsider if somebody wishes to add additional argument. The point that she said that you usually start at the point where you last were, but in practice you can go back and make identical amendments that have already been considered. It isn't that you can't go back and re-amend back to where you started and had a previous vote. It just means you start from there again.
Mr. Chairman,
My understanding is we're operating according to Robert's Rules of Order, right? All right. Does anyone have a copy of Robert's Rules of Order?
Not with us tonight.
Is it possible there's some confusion between what Mr. Josephson thinks and what I think amongst us and others as to Mason's Rules of Order as opposed to Robert's Rules?
Yes, there is.
All right. Then we're operating under Robert's Rules of Order. If you don't recall, Joe, the best of my knowledge, it operates, as Arlo said, it takes 6 votes. Now, if we could just ask for a ruling from the chair and let them know.
I think there's no problem, because we all agree in principle that if we are going to follow the procedure, either one is a fair procedure, then I think the sense of the body is to allow the people who want reconsideration to get to the merits and either change their vote or reassert it, whatever they want to do.
So no problem. The chair would entertain the motion to reconsider that.
Does that have to be done?
To vote on it, you'd have to vote on a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we reconsider the executive form of government.
Second.
We're short on one of our
Question.
G of the reconsideration was
Sure. Question.
questions called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So ordered. Now we're back to the motion. That the district body be apportioned.
This is executive branch.
Wait a minute, were we voting on to reconsider it, or were we voting on...
To reconsider.
All right.
No, but what are you voting to reconsider?
What are we going to reconsider?
Well, the chair thinks it's redistricting, and I think it's
No,
executive.
it's executive.
At the moment, we're talking about executive.
I got in the wrong page here.
We have to wait till Jane gets here. Oh, we talk.
Terry Holmes,
Stand and talk.
Jane Engman seconded. To provide for a strong full-time executive mayor and a chief administrative officer appointed by the mayor.
That's on the date of page 32 of your April 23rd minute.
April 23rd. I guess I should not have handed that one back.
No, you didn't. I have mine. Would you like to want mine, Mary?
That's what we get.
Let me get one in here.
At the risk of spoiling your pen.
Thank you.
Nobody never gives me nothing.
Down here at the bottom. Provides for a strong full-time executive and chief administrative officer.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarification, was the one amendment, did that go with the main motion? That the administrative officer be confirmed by the legislative body? That amended?
There was a motion that was passed after a separate motion, as I remember.
Well, may I make an inquiry again? I see at page 30, I recall that Mrs. Holmes moved for the full-time executive mayor, and then a motion was made as a substitute, which was defeated. But I don't see in the minutes that Mrs. Holmes' motion was adopted, and it was. And then later on, the question was raised by Mr. Fisher about confirmation, but that was after approval of the Holmes motion, which should be the question now before the commission.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, Mr. Josephson, that's correct. To the best of my recollection.
At this point in time.
You like that?
Well, Mr. Chairman, for clarification now, are you saying that the only matter before us is the one motion to provide for a strong full-time executive mayor and the chief administrative officer appointed by the mayor? Is that what you stated?
Yeah, but I'm also stating that the minutes don't reflect that we acted in that way.
And we did. And we did.
I acted on it just after Carlos got report.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Sherry.
On page 33, approximately the third paragraph down, from the bottom of the page, is where the vote came on the administrative officer being confirmed by the legislative body, and I believe following that was the vote on the main motion, which is missing from the minutes.
Oh, I thought it was before that.
I think we were short at that time. Weren't we short at that time, and maybe we never did vote it either way?
No, we did.
We voted, we have lots of people.
The minutes are in error.
We're missing something here, because we did take some votes on it.
Well, the vote is really immaterial, but what is of concern at this point is what the motion was that was voted.
It was your motion.
Yeah, it was my
And that should be the question, but
plus the fact that the administrative officer was confirmed by the legislative body.
well, yeah, I don't know whether that came after or before. We'll have to, if we're correcting this, we'll have to correct the minutes. Otherwise, we would again be able to go through this process.
When this process is all over, I will move to have the minutes amended or something.
I'm sorry, since I wasn't there that night, I feel like I just need different days. I have one
Okay.
listened to all of Vicky's tapes, and I made my own notes because I really wanted to follow hers, and truly felt that I had picked up on all of the motions. Now, maybe there is some motions. Yeah.
What happened was that the substitute motion was defeated, as these reflect.
In the first paragraph on
Page 33.
Okay.
Subsequently, and I'm not sure whether it was before Mr. Fisher's reference to confirmation or after, I may remember that differently, but anyway, after the first paragraph of page 33, the motion at page 32 was adopted.
Okay, so that's the first one.
Yes.
Actually, it probably is, Mr. Chairman, actually the vote probably came at the end of the first paragraph on 33.
That's what I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Right after the substitute motion?
Right after. Mr. Chairman, Vicki did say that she was somewhat bewildered by the motion substitutes, amendments, and so forth.
There was a place in red on her notes to me, and I thought I picked it all up when I went through them.
Jane?
Well, it's not proof, but I got my minutes from that meeting, and I can say who voted on that motion and which way they voted.
Please don't
You want to know?
You know that information would be helpful.
Well, all I can say is it's just here how it went and who voted.
Rather than that, perhaps if Ms. Angvik could give that to the secretary, and the members can check with the secretary to be sure they were recorded correctly by Ms. Angvik.
Mr. Chairman,
That would do it.
I wonder if it would be possible to move by common consent of the body that we include both the amendment and the main motion and also the amendment to give us something to...
Mr. Chairman, you certainly have the consent of the maker of the motion, if I can get the consent of my second.
Well, yeah.
Who was
Sure.
it? Jane Angvik.
Do I have then before me a motion?
Yeah, you did. The motion to reconsider the executive form of government. And nothing on there?
But
Well, that's not perhaps...
the question, I think, is whether the commission will adopt the strong full-time executive mayor with a chief administrative officer appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the assembly.
That's the way the motion should read.
No idea. You can't ask me for old minutes.
Well, this is what we want to work on right now.
Is there any discussion?
I'm sorry, I don't know what we're doing.
Isn't the motion here on the base?
The motion is 32 with the amendment by Mr. Fisher.
For the confirmed?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, just to state it so everybody knows then, would be to provide for a strong full-time executive mayor and a chief administrative officer appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the legislative body, right?
All right.
Chairman, is the procedure now that we are open for discussion and amendment and a vote as if this motion were just made on the floor?
Right. Mr. President, I think that everybody has in their hands the poll that was done on the telephone, and I think that it too said that this was what the majority of people wanted.
Mr. Chairman, since that has been referred to, I talked to Mrs. Rowan on the phone, and she indicated that there were about 54 more to be done, and wondered if she should go ahead with these results that are before us. And I told her I would ask the group if they wished them to continue trying to get the call back on the remaining 54, she would do so. 169 interviewed, with 54 that they were unable to reach. A lot of people were out of town over the weekend, and there's one poll we're still working on it this evening, but 23. And that she would go ahead and finish that out if we so desired, if we wanted the full callback aspect of it completed. Mr. Sheffield?
Frank, I was just going to ask that people are dealing with the Rowan Committee if they feel that they're getting a good cross-section of the people in the whole area.
Mr. Chairman, I really feel that as conscientious an effort to be random has been effected as is possible under polling techniques.
Mr. Chairman, Jim, do you think it's desirable for them to go ahead with the last 54 if they can? I have a feeling it isn't going to change the results, but I think we ought to know if it did, because it may be some particular area of town that has not been covered.
Well, Mr. Chairman, it's a question that they have called all the numbers, and the very fact that you did not get a call and an answer from some of them is in its nature, by its very nature, excuse the randomness, because they didn't answer the phone, they're out of town, or they're unavailable to comment. And so,
then it is random.
It is random to the fact that people have picked up their phone and answered, you see, but we had another 500 that did not answer, so we don't know how they fit in. I suppose we could cross-tabulate in terms of their previous responses and pick it out.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's important that we finish up the phone back survey if it's going to have its maximum validity. And part of it is that the next question is, shall we have them do some cross-tabulations which might be quite interesting in terms of checking these responses. First of all, back to see whether the people responded consistently from the first poll to the second poll, to see whether it's an informed response or a consistent response, and several other very interesting things which we might use in our work on the second draft of the charter. And in order to do that, I think one of the reasons that number is so high, the 50-some, is that we asked them to do it so quickly, and I don't think they had adequate staff working in the brief number of days. So I'd be in favor of having this.
Jane?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask Ms. Holmes, when do you think we'd make a decision then?
No, I'm not proposing that we hold off and not make a decision waiting for it. I'm just saying that the rowing group is doing nothing further unless we direct them to. And as I understood, this was just, shall we have continue?
It would be my recommendation, Chairman, that they complete the callback, because I think it's useful information, and the cross-tabulation for further input.
Is it the consensus of the commission to have the callback completed and the cross-tabulation made? Is there any objection to that? Then have Mr. Parsons, Public Opinion Research Committee, so inform the roll. We have before us the motion again. Is there further discussion on the motion?
Question.
Question is called. Roll call.
Does anyone will begin with alphabetically? Is that all right?
Yes.
What are we voting on?
The question is, shall there be a strong executive with an appointed administrator confirmed by the Assembly, by the legislative body?
Yes. Try.
I don't know.
There are negative and positive aspects of that, so would you like to verify this one?
I'm still looking at the poll.
Mr. Chairman? Could I suggest we take a 10-minute break? I think it's a serious enough thing. If Fred wants to think about it,
Yeah, I'd like to look at. I'd like to read this poll.
I wasn't here at the last meeting.
On a matter here, we could rule it and have a
Brouhaha.
brouhaha, and it actually, the vote was called for, and yet we ran into this last situation, and how accommodating do you wish to be?
Could we just stand at ease for?
Evidently, Fred had not read this. This is seemingly the implication.
Well, Mr. Chairman, we went through this once before, and it is the worst breach of parliamentary ethics to interrupt a vote and then go on with other things. Now, it's happened before, and I think we should get it firmly in our minds that it is not supposed to happen, and adhere to that kind of a rule. And if we have objections to the vote being taken, we should say so before the roll is started to be called.
Mr. Chairman, I would point out that it is appropriate that the chair actually repeat the vote, and this time it was paraphrased by Mr. Josephson, and I hesitate as a parliamentarian to get in and, start running it. I think that it is vitally important that when people vote, that they know what they're voting on. I think there's a question that Mr. Scheid feels he does not know it, and I feel that is the overwhelming thing that needs to be straightened out prior. Everybody needs to know what the vote is before, and it seems obvious to me he did not know.
Mr. Chairman, the reason I'm doubting on the thing, first of all, I was not here at the session when the vote was taken, as everyone here at the table knows. And I'm seeing those minutes tonight for the first time, so I just don't want to jump into a quick vote here. I'd like to just have the benefit of the survey I'm looking at in the minutes.
Well,
Mr. Chairman, I think Mrs. Sturgielewski's point is well taken, and I would move for a 5-minute recess.
Second.
We'll start all over again.
Aye.
I don't know whether that's parliamentary procedure, but
Let's do it.
I think it's
Let's do it.
I wonder
Slate, right?
A motion to reconsider one night off.
I'm here. Where's the rest of you?
And the reason he did
Come on,
that
kid.
was
Saturday night's the
Bill
first
wanted
night
to
off,
consider,
kid.
but you can only reconsider if you're on the
Saturday
winning side.
Come on, Dick.
Where's Lisa?
Lisa!
Boy, you guys need to fall.
But Nick, would you get Lisa?
I will get Lisa.
Mary, don't go. One at a time.
Go high.
Did you what?
Hey, who are we missing?
Lisa?
Saturday night's your first free night.
Appreciate your coming.
Who wants to
Stick
go?
around and watch what you
Who wants to get Lisa?
Won't you please? Dick went for her.
Oh, Dick.
That's like you lose a kid in a department store and then three of them go to find him and bring him home.
If you're lucky, they're all gone.
Let's face on what's in front of us first, Mr. Sheffield. There is a motion in front of us to provide for a strong, full-time executive mayor and chief administrative officer appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the legislative body. Are you ready for the vote, Mr. Sheffield?
I'd like to offer once again a substitute motion. Feeling compelled to speak of my convictions and make a motion to, as a substitute motion for a city manager form of government with a full-time mayor. With the legislative body appointing, hiring that manager.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that there be a substitute motion has been moved and seconded that there be elected full-time mayor.
No?
Is that correct? Voting member of the legislative body, and the legislative body appoints the city manager. Is that correct? Is there any discussion on the substitute motion?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I swear I'm going to bring my Robert's rules with me. I don't have any argument with the issue, but I do have some argument with the issue. It seems to me that substitute motion is so out of phase with the original motion as to be not be able to be considered. I don't know.
No, it is a substitute motion, and my understanding of the substitute motion.
My understanding was there isn't any such thing as a substitute motion.
Well, I suggest that Mr. Christian bring his Robert Rules of Order next time. He talked about this last time and didn't bring it this
Mr.
year.
Chairman, I would state that it is an appropriate motion in that it speaks to the issue of really the form of the executive, and the substitute motion, according to Roberts, is appropriate and is voted upon and then can become the main motion. I don't think there's any question.
Okay.
Is there any discussion?
Question.
Question's been called for. Roll call.
Shall I start with Edward or shall I start with Stove?
Start with me. Start with A.
Edmund?
No.
John?
Yes.
Fisher?
No.
Brony?
No.
Holmes?
No.
Josephson?
No.
Parker?
No.
Carson?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Sheffield?
Yes.
Bertolucci?
No.
7.
The substitute motion died. Back to the main motion. Is there any discussion on the main motion, which is provide for a strong full-time executive mayor and a chief administrative officer appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the legislative body?
Mr. Chairman,
Let's
although it was hotly debated last week. I was not here for it. And this, I guess, matter is important enough to just get a couple of comments on the record. It's one that I've debated and thought a great deal about. It can work, and I think that was stated last week. Either way, I just got back from a U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting on a bicentennial matter, but I used that as an opportunity to speak to a good number of people from varying communities, a good number of them from California, some Oregon, Nevada, we had them from Iowa, primarily Western people, some of them having gone through Albuquerque, New Mexico, for instance, just through a unification type of effort. And the diversity in the form of executive and the councils is really tremendous. The one thing they could almost agree upon was the Board of Supervisor, who was also an administrator, was extremely poor. But there seemed to be some relationship, say, between the executive, the length of time then that the legislative body did serve. And I think a lot of the kind of discussion that we have had, so that if you do have city council, for instance, you would get into a method of voting whereby a new group could come in perhaps and get out a city manager. But I really think that on balance I prefer the strong mayor for the veto power. I think that it can undo perhaps hasty legislation. I think it gives the people someone that they can look to articulate really the community goals. And I do agree with Vic Fisher's comments that it perhaps in some ways may not be quite as efficient a form of government, but it is one that is a great deal more responsive to the citizenry. And so I have to support this point, but it's not an easy one.
Further discussion? Here's a call for the question. Questions in the call. Roll call.
Mr. Trice?
Opposed?
Fisher?
Yes.
Brody?
Yes.
Holmes?
Yes.
Josephson?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Carson?
No.
Reed?
No.
Sheffield?
No.
Sturkowski?
Yes.
Andrews?
Yes.
Motion is passed.
74.
We go on to next reconsideration. Districting.
Chairman, I would move for reconsideration of districting.
Second.
Moved and seconded for reconsideration of districting. Is there any discussion? Mr. Sheffield.
What are we discussing? Are we discussing the last motion that was made?
Shall we reconsider?
Shall we read?
Oh, okay.
Reconsider.
So shall we reconsider?
Consider.
Okay. I have no.
Did someone move that?
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, so ordered.
It's okay.
Motion. The motion before us on reconsideration. One second. And here I will refer to our parliamentarian again, which
Mr. Chairman, it's my understanding that the motion before us is to provide for 10 single-member districts with a 2-year term and 3 representatives elected at large.
I think that's where we were.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Sheffield?
I will offer a substitute motion to try with Mr. Fisher.
Lovely.
That we, in my substitute motion is that we have multi-districts without naming them, similar to the policy that we now have, acting under now, present form of government. Not the present form of government, but the districts. That would be 4 districts. You can help me out with it.
Your motion then would read, your substitute motion would read for 4 three-member districts?
Yes.
Or for 4 districts, similar to the ones presently enforced in the borough.
Presently enforced in
Mary, that's 3, 3, 3, and 2.
Yes.
3-year terms?
Yes. That included in your motion, 3-year term. The motion then would read, provide for 4 districts, 3 districts with 3 members each, and 1 district with 2 members, all to have 3-year terms. Is there any discussion of the motion?
I'll second.
Mr. Chairman, would you repeat that one more time?
The motion is to provide for 4 districts, 3 members in each of 3 districts, and 2 members in 1 district, each with a 3-year term. Is there discussion? Lisa?
I was wondering if I could ask Bill why he feels multi-member districts are good and what they would work well within the area.
Well, without 3 districts, I don't know if I believe it or not, I feel that generally people that I talk to seem to be generally satisfied with a multi-district scheme. And I don't mean to call it a scheme as something derogatory. I think that the borough worked a long time on this, and I think that they found that people are generally satisfied with it. I don't have a big hang-up with single-member districts, but I feel that single-member districts, in my own mind, won't help pass for unification. And I think multi will.
But why on the ballot, the ballot for the planning board, why it went single-member at-large, multi-member, single voted vote? That's how the vote came in.
They have a big campaign against it.
By who?
By some group we don't even know about.
But it passed in every district.
Parsons?
Our survey callback had some interesting data in this regard for consideration. I'm not pushing any particular method. With some the telephone survey,
Talk to the question.
there were 169 interviews. Beg pardon?
Name the question you're looking at so Bill can follow you.
I will. In question 81, there are 80 who want single-member districts of that 169 interviewed, or less than half. A little less than half. 58 wanted 4 to 3. Now, in spite of that, some would still like to have some elected community-wide. Question 82, 67. No, 77. So it's a somewhat even-Steven basis in there. Interestingly, 83, how many should be elected community-wide? If you add them up, you've got about 60 again that want some elected community-wide. And I can't say it's a thing except that there is a trend that statistically would not bear you out one way or the other. The trend is towards a single member.
Mr. Carson makes a good point. I observed the same thing on that survey. Plus the fact that I talked about community councils, and that's very workable with a multi-district. I never thought about that until tonight. Mr. Chairman.
I think that unwittingly, I'm sure, these things are being misused because Mr. Rowan's analysis, as he profiled these figures, was very specific that this was the more critical of the issues that we're taking up tonight in terms of unification. I suspect that may be because you have to know who it is that is saying they want single-member districts. And my recollection was that the people who wanted single-member districts most strongly were the ones we are trying to reach in obtaining their unification vote. In other words, their vote aye or nay on unification may hinge on the kind of districting system, whereas the votes of others on unification will not hinge on whether there is multi-member or a single-member district. So before these make any sense, you have to know who you're speaking to. Now, if anybody wants to correct me, please do so, but I specifically recall Mr. Rowan telling us that this was the critical make-weight to people as to how they might vote on the unification question. I don't suggest, incidentally, that ought to be the end of the inquiry. There's still the question as to what's the better government. But I just raised the point because I think that hadn't been mentioned earlier in the discussion.
Mr. Chairman, the other night I had made a motion that called for us including in the first draft of the charter what would allow for a voter option as to composition of the new government, the choices being a single-member district and the multi-member district composed of 4 districts. I happen to run on the basis of supporting multi-member districts and happen to prefer them. But I think we've had a tremendous amount of testimony that people do in the poll and in some of the public hearing testimony that there's a great deal of interest in the single-member district. I want to see a charter passed. I would like us, before we make this decision, to give every possible chance for input. And I feel, although I feel very strongly for for the multi-member, and maybe we could force it through with the 6 to 5. I know it's a very divisive issue and one that could very much hurt us. And perhaps our credibility with the public. And I personally feel at this point I'm going to have to vote against this and then to try my substitute motion to bring back for the first draft the 2 issues to go out to the public and allow them more comment.
Sherry?
Mr. Chairman, I would feel the same way that Arliss does. I think my personal preference is for multi-member districts, but I would feel very uncomfortable putting that in the first draft of the charter or in the charter. I would much rather see a vote, and we have had testimony that it would not be a good idea to have the 2 choices on the ballot, because you might, not knowing which form would be the final form, you might tend to vote against it anyway. Those who favor the single-member district seem to feel that that is the overwhelming community
choice and ought to feel confident in their having it on the vote. I don't think we want to force on this community anything that the community does not want. And so I think we should feel comfortable about putting it on the ballot for them.
Jane?
Mr. Chairman, I'm speaking against the motion, and as I had said earlier, thinking that single living districts allow for citizens to be in direct contact with at least one representative that they can identify as their own, and appears to make government more responsive. And perhaps it's that word appearance, as far as the charter sellability is concerned, that might be of most concern to us as far as the whole concept of unification passing.
Fred?
Well, it's made the point that the tremendous amount of testimony that this commission has had indicates single-member district. The testimony this commission has had has been very light.
No, I didn't say, I didn't use the word tremendous. We had certainly some
It's
testimony.
been very light and it's been very slanted in vested groups. And again, I come back to the fact that my biggest fear with a single-member district is sectionalism. We're trying to get away from anything that smacks of sectionalism. I think this is leading into it.
Mr. Sheffield?
Well, I think in one of my purposes for making the motion was that I think a lot of us felt that maybe we were getting a little tired 2 weeks ago, and we thought we ought to reconsider it. So to help get it off dead center, I made that motion. I personally favor them about multi-member districts, and I think that we need to keep in mind too that this is the first draft, and that when the first draft comes out, we're going to get a lot of press and a lot of feelings back, and that the second draft will be the more critical one probably on these issues than now. But we should try to be right now and present something straightforward. I think it's one thing to put everything in there to make it pass, but then I think you have to vote with conviction at the same time.
Lisa?
Can I ask a question, Mark? Some question, Fred?
Mark?
If we put in the first draft the multi-member, single-member choice, how do we get feedback on that? How do we know which people want?
Can I answer that? The minute you hit that, you're going to get a real blast from the Anchorage Times. They're going to come out, and they're going to come out real fork-footed on multi-district. And they're going to knock everything in the head on single-member district, which worries me, which really could screw up the whole charter situation. It's an issue, I agree, that we're going to have to tread very gingerly. But we got to be careful we don't pull the press against us with this first draft.
I say,
Mr. Chairman.
I mean, being a politician now, be a politician now.
How do we get the feedback on that? I don't care about the newspaper. I care about the people.
I don't think you should give the public a choice.
Well,
I have her.
there is, of course, I think, an interrelationship between the people and the newspaper. That's the problem. I feel, many do not, but I feel that the solution we arrived at is a fairly good resolution. I think the problem in the poll, and I think that's the answer, Lisa, that Arliss will let me speak for her to that degree, that as I understood her suggestion, it was that the people actually ballot ultimately on
Possible.
or
That's
possibly.
premature to say that.
Well, then I'm wrong.
Right.
But if it becomes a matter of a ballot, my hang-up is twofold. One, that I listened carefully to Vic on this, and I guess we disagree. I don't know mechanically how you deal, not in the question that Sherry raised as to how this affects passage of the charter. It may actually help the charter get passed, but in terms of equity and a sense of fairness to those who might have their vote on unification changed by virtue of that formula. Second thing about it is, and I think Vic's testimony tends to corroborate this, is that you can conduct yourself in such a way that you highlight this as a critical issue, and you invite people to debate you and to polarize on something like that, and I think that may be an effect of that's undesirable. So, if there were a way to mechanically get that vote in, I'd be less opposed to it. If then there was a second stage on unification, but to do it at once, I think creates a problem.
I think we would get that feedback after we release the first charter. But anything in that first charter, I think we ought to give deep consideration to staying away from any balloting. I mean, the public elected us as a commission to come out with a charter, and we're being wishy-washy if we go back and we say, do you like this or that? Let's take our chances and go out and give them the first draft. If it doesn't fly, we've got a second one to work on. But I think it does a great injustice to go wishy-washy.
Mr. Chairman,
Mary?
Lisa asked him a question and he's avoided it. We put the first draft out. How do you know whether it did or didn't fly?
Well, they'll tell us.
Oh, you're going to know real fast.
How are you going to know whether it is pressure group speaking or whether it is a cross-section of the community? Are we going out with a poll? You didn't believe the first poll, or will you believe the second poll?
What's going to happen, Mary, is the minute that charter hits the street, you're going to have the first pressure group, which is going to be a press. It's going to take a stand for or against it. So you're going to get that feedback very quickly. You're going to know which way they stand. That's number one. Secondly, once they've taken that stand, I'm afraid a lot of your people are going to fall in with it.
Well, we go back to 4 more public hearings, don't we?
Fred tells me he didn't believe the public hearings the first time. That tells me he's not intending to believe the public hearings the second time.
I didn't say I didn't believe them. I said that we're not overwhelming, with an overwhelming majority, as all has said. And that they were...
He's also told me he doesn't believe the poll the first time.
I did not see Joe citizen of those things. I saw people that represented a lot of vested groups.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Joseph's point is well taken, that it can be a very divisive issue if we choose to polarize on it. And I hear someone else saying that we are elected to create a government. And I think we have to consider those two things and to work as well as we can together to form a government that will work. And I think that I heard some reflection on the part of some of us that the creation of 10 and 3 was somewhat bizarre, if nothing else. A poor compromise, one that would engender enough votes to get through, but I'm not sure what way it will reflect in the press. I mean, they may laugh at us, rather than being something that's going to be a working way for the government. And I would hope that we can come to some kind of consensus here so that we are together. I'm willing to try.
Lisa?
Can I ask my question to Fred then?
Yeah, go ahead.
You talk about sectionalism and wordism and single-member districts. When I look them up, they say that they're political subdivisions and multi-member districts.
Well, that's the academic approach. Now, if you use the political approach...
Such as in Chicago?
No, you're missing my point. And I'm trying to answer your question directly. Right? The academic approach, you're absolutely right in what you're saying. The definition of a single-member district and whatnot. Now, when I'm talking wardism, and I haven't used the word wardism, you did, I said sectionalism. Here's what I'm saying. When you release that chart, and it's a single-member district, the Anchorage Times is going to come out and they're going to take that charter right off the bat with, we've got a ward system proposed by our commission. This is what's going to happen.
For wards, they define those as political subdivisions.
Well, fine. I know what it's defined as, but what I'm saying from a political... And this is going to influence the public on the work we have done to now. I would rather take my chances and come out with something like multi-member, pull the press with us. Now, wait a minute. Pull the press with us. And if the public disagrees with it, have it in our feedback and we'll change then. But let's not kill our chances in the beginning. I mean, from a political strategy viewpoint, that's all I'm looking at. Because I know what's going to happen with the times.
Jane?
Mr. Chairman, just because Mr. Atwood and his people are opposed to single-member districts does not mean that we couldn't produce our own media that would be perhaps as effective, if not more so, if we use radio and TV to suggest that we're not creating, a wardism. And I do believe we're sexual.
Some of us are babes in arms when we get into this kind of a thing. There's a lot of know-how and experience that goes behind these things.
Mr. Chairman,
Wayne?
I think that what Rowan told us was that the people want a responsive government that's responsive to them. I think that we tried our best to find an unbiased method of finding what the community, a representative cross-section of the community, wanted. We admitted that the poll that was taken on the vote might not have been an unbiased cross-section. And we tried to design a poll that would be taken in an unbiased manner. It came back and it said the same thing. I feel that if we do anything else other than give them single-member districts as they said they wanted, that we have in fact proved that we ourselves are not responsive to the people.
I think if we took Lisa's idea of this community council and sold that and marketed it and blew it up, I think the public would accept that and they'd even forget about single-member or multi-member district. That would be the bigger thing.
I guess I'm the, well, no, I'm not going to say that. I think that the version we came out with would not be ridiculed. I think if there are people who are concerned that single-member districts are too parochial, it provides some modification of that. It may be that 10 and 3 is wrong. It should be 9 and 2 or something of this sort. And maybe we can be flexible about that as we actually look at what the maps would look like. But it seemed to me to provide a fairly good solution. And I was interested when Vic was testifying because he said that was the system that was used in the Constitutional Convention, and indeed it was. There were some delegates who ran at large and some who ran from districts. We had a pretty good Constitution come out of that. I don't really, and I give other examples of where that's been done in the past. They're all functioning pretty well. I don't really know. He's given us a precedent which was successful, and which the Anchorage Times supported, by the way. I don't know. That's a terrible one.
I would like to speak to that question. I was speaking in relation to the multi-member district and the single-member district. Joe, I requested that we look at that you offered us the other day again, because I was worn out that evening and I could not really think. One of the problems that I have with this combination is that I think it perhaps has too many on the local legislative body to hope to finish public business in a reasonable length of time of an evening. Now, if we went to this sort of thing with that many people on the local legislative body, I cannot feature being able to quit at a reasonable time of night, and we would continue to have folks ask us, what sort of dirty work did you do after 12 o'clock last night?
Mary,
we've talked about the possibility of taking care of that by proposing that no public business could be done after 12 o'clock. But I wish to say that I have changed my mind. I cannot support that many people elected at large. In fact, I think that I'm back down to where I would even question supporting 2 at large. I think that the mayor being elected at large does give that large representation that is needed. I will just have to say that I have thought it over and I will have to explain to you that I cannot support anything other than the single-member district. I fully wish to have this government as responsive to the people as possible, and I think that's the only way that it will be as fully responsive as
I just want to quickly reiterate, I wish, as Jim said, I wish we could reach some sort of consensus. I'm afraid that we're in a horns of a dilemma here. There's a certain number of us that won't vote for this, there's certain numbers will vote for the choice, and there's certain numbers won't vote for the single member, and frankly, I think we're going to have to bite the bullet and choose one and sell it, and sell it together. And I'd argue, please vote in favor of this motion.
Mr. Chairman, I find that after the discussion that apparently I'm in somewhat of a minority position as to going to the voter in the first draft with 2, I am therefore going to have to go on my philosophical bent, which is toward the multi-member districts. I wish to state, however, that I'm going to be listening very carefully at the round of public testimony. I could in no way support really a 2-tier. I think Vic used the word, and perhaps it's improper to use it, but where certain members are, say, elected at large and others by district, I think that if it's a good system, that we need to have all of one class, so to speak.
I would like to state for the record that after the first draft, there's every indication that everybody wants single-member district. I'll be the first guy to support it out the hill, to sell it all over the place.
I would concur with Fred Hartnett that I am prepared to support this motion.
Is there a call for the
Question?
What is the
Take the
question?
question, please.
question for to provide for 4 districts, 3 with 3 members, 1 with 2 members, all with 3-year terms. That's it. Roll call.
We begin with Mr. Fisher.
Yes.
Crowley.
No.
Holmes. Yes. Josephson.
No.
Parker. No. Parsons.
Yes.
Reed.
Yes.
Sheffield. I'm sure we're going to have another abortion. Sheffield.
Yes.
Sturgeon.
Yes.
Edmund.
No.
Try.
Yes.
Motion passes 7-4.
7-4.
Congratulations, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Well, you're going to go out and raise some money.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
may I respond to a comment that was just made?
Yes, you may.
You know, the old democratic system doesn't always give us, and I've gone home and I've spent many nights where I was absolutely heartsick that the system didn't work the way I wanted. I think we've got to give the public a chance to have it, and if we don't get our bag of marbles at the store, to go out and shout from the mountaintops is not right at the point that we are now. I think that we deserve an opportunity
I'm
to...
going out to raise money to make sure that the people know what was voted on, how they voted in the election, to make sure that they know how the poll voted, and then to make sure that they know how the commission voted. And that if they still feel like they said in the poll and then the other, they're going to have to say so. And that's the sort of advertisement that I'm going to put out.
I object to any member of the commission taking on this kind of an action. This is not a proper action for a commission at all. and it'll just break the commission in two, and if this is what's going to happen, I say we better stop the business right here. Now, either we're going to operate as a unified commission, and we're going to act like grown-ups, or we're going to get persnickety and go into this retaliation type of thing.
This is retaliation. I know what the papers are going to advocate. I'm going to try to get a few ads to get the other side of the picture given. That's all I can say.
Larry, that buys us nothing, because if you're going to get a few ads and somebody else in this commission's entitled to get ads to rebut that, and we're going to have a campaign within the commission which certainly is going to lose public trust in us.
You certainly may.
Mrs. Holmes.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to suggest that this has been a very hard week. It's been a very hard month for all of us. We've had many meetings. I've added it up. We've averaged 4 commission meetings a week for the last month. I would hope that no one would go out hastily to take any action individually without thinking and without considering the hard work put in by all the commissioners.
That's right.
A lot of us have put a lot of time, a lot of money, and a lot of effort in. I think that any individual action could only backfire on the commission as a whole, could only backfire on subsequent issues. If we appear as a divided commission, if we change in the second draft and have, for instance, single-member districts, we may have created a sufficient hostility in the minds of the community that the charter would be defeated on the basis of remembered things said a few months before in the paper, which, once you've said them, can never be retracted from the public mind. And we might sabotage a very important issue.
Mr. Chairman?
I'd like to speak to this because I voted with Mrs. Froney on this issue, and I feel quite strongly about it. And I think that the lack of viability of the course we follow tonight will be demonstrated in future hearings. For that reason, I really would hope that we can all exercise some restraint until those hearings come about. Someone said that it's better to lose in a cause that will ultimately triumph than to triumph in a cause that will ultimately fail. And I think that if you remember that the public is going to only give us the same respect we give each other, it would just be suicidal, I think, for the Commission as an institution to at this particular stage, when we're going back to the public and have every opportunity to revise anything that we've done, to conduct ourselves so that we destroy the opportunity that I think is a great one to ultimately prevail. That's my feeling about it, and I speak as one who voted and lost tonight. I won last week, and I think I'll win ultimately. If I don't, that's
Mr. Chairman, I asked a while ago of Mr. Child what it would take to convince him of what the community wanted, what sort of a response that it would take for him to accept. He could not give me one. He has not offered one. I would be perfectly willing so long as I felt that it was a fair way of getting a response. Now, I think that the poll that went out was our attempt to find a response from the community as to what they really wanted. We tried to find an equitable distribution. Now, if he can come up with a way that he would accept what the people said between now and the last, I would like to accept it, but he has not offered me any alternative.
But, Mr. Chairman, I looked at this survey tonight, and it's not an overwhelming survey either way, and this is what I base my opinion on.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would respond further to you, Mary, and say with all respect to Fred, he's not writing the charter. He's just one of 11 people. And several of those who voted against you and me tonight said that they were open-minded about it. If they are, I'm sure being, as a matter of human nature, if we polarize ourselves and place each other on the defensive for a public position taken, it will be harder
I
For
would
those
rather not do
individuals,
it, so long as
Mary,
we can come
it will
to
be
something.
harder for those individuals to respond to the kind of evidence that I think will be mustered at those hearings.
Mr. Sheffield?
Frank, I think as a maker of the two controversial substitute motions, one failed and one passed, I felt very strongly about each one of them. I didn't make it just to be funny or smart. I think that, but I'm not going to go out and fight against the merit form of government. I'm going to go along with the commission and work for unification. And if a single member would have passed, I would have felt the same way. I want to pass. I want unification, but some of us feel strongly about something, and some of us feel strongly about the other. I think we have to team up in the end result. I don't think that Mary really means what she said. I think that she's going to go and take it over, and we're going to get together the next week and have some more time.
I would like to ask anybody else, not just Fred, what sort of response is going to convince you, one way or the other, as to what the people want. Now, I've been convinced what the people want. You haven't. What would convince you? This is what I would like to know. I don't want to have to take this stand. I told you to begin with.
Mr. Chairman, I think any time that there's an issue, you get feedback and interest in a multiplicity of ways. I talk to people on the street, people call me up, we have conversations. We're going into the second round. We've had, and Vic has mentioned it, we've had extraordinarily, quote, poor press in that we have had really no press or very limited press. We're going into another round of public hearings. I'll be frank, I still when I started in this damn thing to go in to try and get everything in the world in about the Planning Commission, I swallowed very hard when we wrote the planning section that we did. I have learned a great deal. I feel that I can go back to the public for the second round of public hearings and ask a lot more questions, and questions that are going to help me get a better feel on things. And one of them is certainly going to be on this issue. And so, there's proof, perhaps positive proof, in the methods that have been used toward the single-member district. I think part of it is an education process, and it may be that people will change and come around to your point of view, or again, you may find overwhelming testimony that it's the other way. So I think that there is that chance to go back.
I want to know what testimony we're going to accept. Are we going to accept, as he says, that the folks that come out to us are really the activists for some particular cause, and that is not the general community? What are we going to accept as the general community?
I'm going to listen to the people that come and speak, and I'm going to make that as a subjective judgment as to the amount of weight I will give to that particular thing.
Jane had a...
I would just say, somebody who lost two in there, that if, you want to make sure that the mandate of the public is heard, I would suggest that we're establishing a forum for that, and that we will have public hearings, and it won't take very much energy at all to get the proponents of single-member districts to come before us and tell us that. And I heard both Sherry and Harless and Fred indicate that if they heard that kind of response, that they might go the other way, and that I too find it very, very difficult to think about dividing among ourselves on this issue, particularly in public.
Point of order, Dick Fisher. Mr. Joseph, let's put on Joseph.
This is a parliamentary situation. Is it not a fact that I recall that all we have done is to adopt the substitute in lieu of the main motion, and we should vote again on the main motion?
That's right. That's why I'm speaking. That's what I was telling you.
Dick Fisher.
I think we ought to look at where we are in the community right now. And I'm speaking directly to Mary. I think we all are. We're trying to convince her. We've got multi-districts right now.
which is an abomination in my estimation.
In an ununified government. Now, what we do in this case, if the charter passes, we substitute unified government with multi-districts. I mean, Mary, I don't know that we can solve all the problems in the world with this charter, and maybe that's a problem we ought to solve later. The thing is, what I'm asking is, and I think we all agree that if you took such an action, it would hurt our cause, the unification cause, and it's going to come to no good. It won't help. It can't do anything to help, and I think that's our point.
May I offer that our guest, our professional guest at the other end of the table would like to say something. I appreciate hearing from you.
Well, I apologize for butting into this discussion. This is all very interesting. Just as an outsider, I'd like to offer this comment. The commission decided not to offer, or so far has decided not to offer two options, two versions to the people to decide. At the same time, it is very clear from what everyone here has said that it is expected that the proponents of single-member districts will be right in there talking at the commission, in public hearings, on the street, and everywhere, arguing single-member districts versus multi-member districts. It would seem to me that one way you can help deal with this issue rather than make more of a controversy of sort of the people or a vociferous group of the people against the commission, that you go to the public and say very clearly, here's a section adopted by a 7-4 majority. Here are the arguments for the majority. The minority had the following position. And it just explained to the people that the commission itself was not unanimous. And because this is going to come out at the public hearings anyway, you will have controversy, and you'll make your own members feel better. And this you might do on some of the other split issues that will be before the commission, just like putting a minority report before the public.
Thank you. Jane?
I just have one comment. The Gila River is back in this borough. Assembly's going to have to reapportion themselves anyway. And at the present time, we have the motion adopted or that's before us now suggests that we proceed in the manner that we have at the present time, and Eagle River isn't represented in that one.
May I ask my parliamentarian question? Mr. Josephson said that he felt that the substitute motion had to be, the main motion had to be voted on again.
Correct. I thought Mary was going to leave the room, and I'm
No, I'm not leaving.
okay. We voted so that the substitute motion became the main motion, and it does require a vote.
Chairman, we now have a main motion which itself is open to amendment, is it not?
Yes.
Chairman, along with what Mr. Fisher says, he said earlier in his comments, that is Vic, that sometimes people will vote on things put before them as choices before they vote on the main issue, and I'm afraid I disagree with his comment in terms of sometimes they'll vote on the alternative and then vote against the whole thing instead of vote for the whole
For fear that the wrong thing will come out.
And we have also before us another vote that we had that went 6-4 that in favor of the 10-3 thing, which was, in my mind, the compromise that I could swallow. I don't like this multi-member district thing without any at-large representatives. Just any more than Mary, I think, likes having anything but single-member districts. I want some at-large representatives. I'm willing to go along with this, which is I have to swallow to vote for it. But I think it's something that probably will fly. I don't like it. It's not my cup of tea. It really isn't my cup of tea. But I'm willing to go along and see what happens.
Now that the situation is clarified from a parliamentary point of view, I would like to offer substitutes an amendment or a substitute, that there be an 11-member assembly with 9 single-member districts and 2 at large.
Substitute motion. Or any motion.
Mr. Chairman,
For 9 single-member districts and 2
May I speak to that?
I'd like to know the length of time you're suggesting.
2-year terms. Mr. Chairman, may I speak to that?
Mr. Joseph.
The argument was made that the 13-member body is too large and unwieldy, and there may be merit in that argument. It's also unfamiliar to the voters in the Anchorage area. The single-member district problem, one of the single-member district problems was that there is not, as I understand it, an annual expression by the voters of their choice. It seems to me that the 9 and 2, which we never really voted on last week, may prove to be more acceptable than the 10 and 3.
Yes.
And
Mr. Chairman, parliamentarily, I'm totally confused. If this passes and the other motion passed, where are we?
Oh, Mr. Chairman, if this motion passes, it then becomes the main motion and takes the place of the motion that calls for the multi-member district.
I see.
Mr. Chairman, the argument that each voter should be able to vote for some representative each voting time, to me would be met with 1 at large plus the mayor, because that would you would have the 1 at large on one year and the mayor on the other, which would take care of those years in every single district where they didn't have an individual membership. That I could accept, though I don't think it is logical to have even 2 at large, because it does sort of give that,
Mr. Chairman?
2-level basis.
That assumes a 2-year term for the mayor, which we've not decided on that yet.
No, and we can divide the question on that.
Yes.
too.
I have at least proved tonight that being an at-large representative is no advantage.
You can have it large, single member.
I don't see the problem here. I think that they would all really function as equals, but the argument against having 1 at large that someone made, I think it was Mr. Parsons last week, was that sets him up as the mayor designate and as a natural adversary to the incumbent mayor, and creates an unhealthy situation. I wouldn't want to go to 1 at large assembly.
Is there further discussion on the motion?
Chairman, I have difficulty with the 9 too, and that 2 is not enough. I would more be in favor of 8-3. I think I'll go out and raise some money.
Have fun, Jim.
Is there further discussion on the motion? The motion before us is that we have 9 single-member districts and 2 at large for 2-year terms. Is that correct, Mr. Joseph?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to have one other say on that. This, of course, in my estimation, is much better than the last motion. I wouldn't figure it worth my time to go out and hunt money so long as we had this high a percentage that were at individual districts. I think there is some question as to whether the size of the district is small enough. But on the other side, I think there is a great disadvantage of having too many on the local legislative body, where you have 3 or 4 on it that every time insist on commenting on every issue that comes up that your business doesn't get done until the wee hours of the morning. This one I could swallow.
Any further discussion? Question?
Question.
Question been called. Roll call.
This time we begin with Brody.
Yes.
Holmes,
No.
Josephson,
Yes?
Parker. Yes. Parsons,
No?
Reed,
No.
Sheffield,
No.
Jersey,
No.
Dan Metzger, Chai,
No.
Fisher.
No. Call for the question on the main motion.
Question called on the main motion.
Could you state it again, please?
Main motion is now to provide for 4 single-member districts with
Or more.
four small districts with 3 members from each of 3 districts and 2 members from 1 district and 2-year term. 3-year term.
3 years. Mr. Chairman, are we available for amendment? I would move to amend it to be 2-year terms.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to amend the main motion to be a 2-year term. Is there any discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Mary?
multiple member districts are intended to give the edge to the fellow that has money. They're intended to give the edge to the fellow that's in office. It has been proved to us that to run an area campaign the size of the present areas, that it costs to send out one mail-out to each voter that voted in the last election, somewhere between $600 and $700. Though this does not bother many, it will tend, no matter whether it is this multiple man district or at large, it will tend to thin out good candidates to have the edge to those who have money, as I have said before. And I don't think that necessarily is where good representation has to be.
Is there any further discussion of the motion of 2 years as opposed to 3-year terms? Mr. Shaw.
Mrs. Stroney keeps bringing this thing up about how much it costs to run, which is very subjective, really. That's number one. And secondly, I don't know about money running in a multi-member district. Somebody could run for $100, somebody could run for $1,000. It's hard to say. I don't know if you can make any general statement and say that it's going to be costly. It depends on the person, how well known he is. A person that's well known probably could run for $100 without having to have any mail out or anything else.
Lisa?
I just find disagreement with 2-year term if I'm not that member district concept.
You do? You don't?
Especially, I do.
Chairman, I would like to speak to the amendment. I made it because of the rather overwhelming favoring of that by the voters in our callback. In question 84, it's very clear. 96 say every 2 years, 33 say every year, 32 say every 3 years. It's 2/3 of the people responding ask for a 2-year term, and that's why I made that amendment.
Okay, I intend to be guided by these polls, but I don't intend to be dictated to by these polls. You know, my experience has been that you barely get with it at the end of the first year of your new legislature. And I really think that it's got to be 3 years, and 2 years just doesn't really give you an effective legislative body in my opinion.
Mr. Shaw?
Dick makes an excellent point. The only thing I wanted to add to that is the fact that under multi-districting, you're rotating these people at a rapid rate, which may serve what the person in that survey is trying to get across to you.
Question on the amendment?
Question called on the amendment. The main motion to be 2-year terms instead of 3-year terms. Roll call, please.
Holmes?
No.
Josephson?
Yes.
Parker?
No.
Parsons?
Yes.
Reed?
No.
Sheffield?
No.
Strzelecki?
No.
Andrews?
Yes.
Scheid?
No.
Fisher?
No.
Crony?
Yes.
Seven, four, fail.
Call for the question on the main motion.
Main motion. Question called for on the main motion.
State it again, please.
The main motion now reads 4 multi-member districts with 3 members from each of 3 districts, 2 members from 1 district, and 3-year terms. Roll call, please.
We begin with Mr. Josephson?
No.
Parker? No. Parsons?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Sheffield?
Yes.
Strzelecki? Andrews? No. Scheid?
Yes.
Fisher?
Yes.
Crony?
No.
Holmes?
Yes.
Yeah, you can prove that
Yes.
Yes. 7, 4.
7-4. Main motion has passed. There. Next order of business before us then is the...
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have just one comment. Last week I was called by Dick, who said that the mayor had instructed Joel DeBoer and himself to get busy working on enforcement, and he was asking what the commission was going to do, because they intended to be guided in their work on an enforcement plan, apparently by this commission's decision. I told him at that point, of course, I didn't know. Would it be proper to tell him at this point that, or inform him of the commission's decision, knowing that he intends to be guided?
You might inform him of the vote
I
also.
told him that I would let him know once something has been decided by him. Dick Wyman is one who called, he works on these matters with the borough.
This is public information, and I think the Volstead's report now is a perfectly legitimate to give to them.
Because what
I would explain to them the whole series of the situation so he understood.
Yeah, the politics of the vote itself is not what I'm concerned about. My hope is that the Assembly will go ahead with a plan and adopt the plan. When I say my hope, I mean I'm asking if the Commission agrees with this strategy, because it seems to be the original strategy, that the Assembly will go ahead with a plan and adopt it, so that the Commission can adopt that plan by reference, at least in the transitional measure, and not have to have a map on the ballot with the charter.
Mr. Chairman,
Ronnie?
there has not been any indication yet, and that was one of the questions that was to have been asked, was whether the Charter Commission wishes the vote to be taken on the districting before the charter is put on the ballot.
Would you say that again, please, Mary?
The Assembly would like to know whether the Charter Commission wants a different balloting time for voting on the map, because you have to, by law, vote on the map for the district.
So would you mean
You have to, by law, vote on the map.
Yes, I'm aware.
You can't just, so they want to know whether you want us to set a second time before August 11th on the districting, a map to put on the ballot before then, or whether you want the map that they would propose to put on the ballot on August 11th.
I was with the girl the other day, and I was talking to Mary Crawford, and she sent us a letter about this also, where if the assembly decides, whatever the two bodies decide to do, if the assembly decided to go ahead and reapportion themselves and go for a vote where they would probably go in June or July, therefore, then if we had the vote in August, what she feels we should do is if we vote in July, then we would have our ratification of the charter in October, and then the assembly postponed for 3 or 4 months the election of the assembly. Otherwise, you're going to have it where you have a vote in June or July, a vote in August, and a vote in October. And as records indicate, voter active.
May I address that? I believe previously that it was determined that the assembly did not have the privilege of
The
putting
assembly
off
does,
their
the city council does.
The city council would have to go ahead with their election.
But you'd have to have the city election anyway.
Yeah, so if the assembly went ahead, then between June and October, there would be 3 elections.
Jane?
Mr. Chairman, as I recall conversation at the subcommittee on Eagle River on the Sunday at Joe's house, we discussed, when Mary brought this question up before, what our advice to the assembly might be. At that time, as I recall the conversation, it went something along the lines of, would probably be to our advantage not to have the election of the redistricting proposal to the public before we have the election of the charter. And much of the rationale was along the same lines as what Lisa just pointed out, where people have to keep going to the polls. Under any circumstance, I do not believe that issue should be on the same ballot as the charter at all. That should not occur. But that it would, I think it would be to our advantage to just hold it off until after we're finished, assuming that we meet an August 12th deadline, that we put it off until, or ask the assembly to put off action on until after we've had our election.
No, I was scratching in. I was wondering, Eagle River has to be, this is a question, Eagle River has to be included in some district.
But it can't be enacted for 6 months. It can't be enacted until the next municipal election anyway.
Yet,
They can't be seated until the October election anyway. Period. No matter when you put the map up.
No, I don't understand. Do they get to vote on the charter in some district somehow? Do they not?
They just vote without being in a district.
They vote. But they can't be seated until October anyway. So let's not even raise that issue with them until after we've had our day in court with them on the charter.
Shirley?
Mr. Chairman, the only difficulty we have with that, Jane, is the time sequence, and that is if the charter fails in August, immediately they have to begin advertising the seats open for the October election. And they would have to agree to defer the October election in the event the charter fails in order to allow for a vote on the map first. And then a vote in November or December, which I think is going to be cumbersome.
Well, Sherry, I really feel that, true, we may create a kettle of fish on that. There's no doubt about it.
That's the best situation, I agree with you, but I'm not sure that it can be done.
If they have their public hearings and things on reapportionment during August, they could still put it on the ballot so that they could get ready probably for an October election if they have.
Mr. Chairman,
Well, no, I was just wondering out loud, and I think we need some more time with this, and maybe I would reactivate Joe's committee here for some serious debate on that. If the possibility exists of concurrent with our charter and election of having the assembly action on it, would that create all sorts of
I think
nightmares?
I was using to be talking about the Constitution, Charter in one hand and the reapportionment
And the
of
reality.
Assembly seats in another.
Mr. Chairman, I posted the orders today. We're departing on our agenda, and the hour's moving on. Still late. It's quick going.
We have one other thing that's come before us with a full commission, and that is the ombudsman.
Chairman, you have a draft, which was part of Article 2.
The assembly.
No.
Yeah? Well, yeah.
That's not the one.
Yeah, that's right.
I voted against motherhood many a time.
I voted against it every time the question's been broached.
How do you feel about ombudsman?
She's against motherhood.
Are you giving him? Are you giving him?
How often have you voted?
When I buy spots in radio.
Mr. Chairman, could you get them back to order?
Them are for their pieces.
Mrs. Hall?
Yes,
For the 11th anniversary.
I apologize to the commission. It was section 209, Office of the Ombudsman, and I can't find a copy.
We don't have one. Mr. Chairman, I think what happened on that, it was a controversial thing. We did not do it in that we were working from the charter and the draft, 71 charter. And we wanted some direction before that was brought up. We weren't even sure we would have a section, so I think we need to go to the 71. Is that not correct?
Right, Mr. Chairman, that was one of the things that we were discussing without a draft, that whole article, Article 2, we discussed without having a draft in front of us. The proposal of the subcommittee was that the Office of the Ombudsman read as in A of Section 210 of the 71 Charter. There is established in the legislative branch of the municipality the Office of Ombudsman, and we proposed that the sentence be added, the duty shall be prescribed by ordinance.
Are you moving that?
I would so.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that
Duties and terminable.
His total office powers and duties shall be prescribed.
Mr. Chairman, duties of term of office and powers prescribed by ordinance.
it's been moved and seconded that the Charter Committee's recommendation for Section 210 be adopted. That is 210, Office of Ombudsman. There is established legislative branch of the municipality, the Office of Ombudsman. The term and length of office, the
Term of office, powers, and duties shall be prescribed by ordinance.
Are you reading from the old charter? Oh, only part. Almost.
shall be prescribed by ordinance.
Like 5 years old, I'll buy it. That's the kind of guy I am.
What,
Parsons?
I would speak in favor of the inclusion, if we're going with the elected mayor who appoints, who is the chief executive officer of the government. I think there is more need for it than the council's manager form of government.
Other discussion?
Question. Who does the ombudsman report to? Who's his direct line of reporting?
Term of office, powers, and duties shall be determined, shall be prescribed by ordinance.
Mr. Chairman, it states that it would be, there is established in the legislative branch of the municipality the office of ombudsman. I think in answer to your question, it would be then the assembly under the form that we have selected at this point.
Okay. Gotcha.
It would, I believe, could work very similarly to the young man that is now performing that function in the borough. He was appointed, interviewed, and established by the legislative body. And I assume, Mary, that he reports to them and
Yes,
is
ma'am.
independent of the office of the mayor.
It certainly is, and we get reports in our packets at least once a month from him.
Mr. Chairman. Yes, very quickly. I'd speak in favor of the motion. I think it's much briefer than the former, in the 71 Charter. I think there's no reason to have the language of the 71 Charter longer. The Assembly at that point was very reluctant in 1971 to establish such an office. They wouldn't do it. And we felt we needed to do that and prescribe the duties and go into some detail. Frankly, it's not necessary any longer. I very much support the motion.
Thank you.
Question.
Questions that call? Roll
Do
call,
that.
please.
Yeah.
This time we begin with Mr. Burke.
Yes.
Carson,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Sheffield,
No.
Church-Lucy,
Yes.
English,
Yes.
Tribe,
Yes.
Fisher,
Yes.
Rowley,
Yes?
Holmes,
Yes.
Josephson,
Yes.
Motion has passed.
Mr. Chairman, could we considering the rest of the agenda until the next regular meeting and adjourn?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a comment in relation to that. Normally I would agree, but we're going out to Eagle River tomorrow, and we're going out to Girdwood on Friday, and I think we ought to take action on the community council article,
All right.
because I think it'll be of particular interest out there.
I'd move the language that was submitted to us in a separate sheet tonight.
Second.
I'd like to ask a question on that, if I may. By the person that drafted it, what does the words negotiation and mean in there? I think the thing would be just as effective or more so without it, but I don't know.
Because these different community councils, it provides that when a community council is formed, that they go in and negotiate the sharing of the rights and powers.
Well, it doesn't say that. It says procedures for the law for the negotiation and the sharing. Well, maybe it does say that.
negotiation of,
It could be
Negotiation for the sharing of rights.
Negotiation with respect to or something.
Yeah, what happens if it say for procedures in law for the sharing of rights?
I think that would be better, don't you?
Wouldn't that really do it for the sharing of rights?
No.
It needs to be negotiable,
Okay.
sort of thing. Negotiable for the sharing of rights and powers would be all right, I believe.
Negotiation is a bad word to use in a charter or constitution. It's tremendous in unions, but not for this purpose. Really.
Mr. Chairman, the reason to put negotiation in there is because this will be for each individual community council. Otherwise, the legislative body could come up with a list.
That's what I'm saying.
Mr. Chairman,
Mary?
I disagree that it's a bad word. I think it's the word that's apropos, because the controlling thing is that top sentence. There's no reason why they shouldn't have all the rights that do not infringe upon the rights of other people in the community.
Rick, Lisa, I want to suggest moving the phrase between the local government and each community council immediately to the point where it immediately follows the word negotiation, so that it's clear the parties between whom you are prescribing negotiation, which negotiation sits there by itself.
That's right.
They may negotiate with themselves. about these matters.
Could you read that as it were
I would
stated?
suggest preliminarily allow for negotiation between the local government and each community council with respect to sharing of rights and powers.
With the permission of my second, I would make that the motion.
I would concur.
Can you read that, please?
What's the motion?
Okay.
The motion then would read to adopt the community council section, which reads as follows. Community councils may be established to provide residents the opportunity for maximum community self-determination without infringing upon the rights of persons not represented by community councils. The legislative body by ordinance shall provide for the establishment, duties, and functions of community councils. Section 2, powers. The legislative body by ordinance shall provide for procedures to allow negotiation
Wait a minute, for the negotiation, right?
To allow the local government and each
for
community.
negotiation between the local government and each community council with respect to sharing of rights and powers, and may provide for each community council to supervise the furnishing of services in an area.
It doesn't change the meaning, please.
Call for the question, Mr. Chairman.
Question has been called for.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
I am with Mr. Chai that I wish we could have come up with a different word than negotiation.
Well,
Haggling.
Mr. Chairman, why don't we let them work on that? And you know, I'm happy to amend it later on. I mean, but the whole argument here was we wanted something to go to these hearings with, and we'll have it. And so, why don't we work on that?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I thought there was an interesting comment that came earlier, and maybe it's too late and we're too weary. I like the idea of the possibilities of somehow tying the community councils not only into the legislative branch, but into the school board. And maybe that's something we should debate at a different time, but I think it's got some merit. I don't quite know how to do it.
Chairman, I think the point was that the minutes should reflect our intent.
Right. That was my point.
I don't know, maybe I misunderstand the city council, the community councils, but I think they're a good idea. But somehow I'd like to see them, you know, Mary's concerned about getting out at 2 o'clock now. I'm concerned about you might not get out till 5 o'clock if you've got 9 community councils coming to your council meeting. How's that going to, how is the legislative body going to handle these community councils?
They don't come to every meeting.
Well, but, you know, who's going to handle them? The mayor? Or is it up to the assembly to figure all that out?
Mr. Chairman, usually the community councils work without going to the legislative body. That's one of the nice things about them, is that they work with the representatives, they work with the administration. They often streamline the meeting process because those people work effectively within the government without having to come and speak at public hearings and as persons to be heard on the agenda of the regular meetings. So it's streamlined.
Mr. Chairman.
I see a tremendous flexibility in the community council. They can be worked now, or as they are now, which really does no more than to say, hey folks, there's going to be a big zoning issue, or we're going to change the method of sewer assessment is going to impact your area. You should be aware of it and have an opportunity to know, you know, who's giving it to them or what's happening. It also has the possibility of being far more than that. It could provide for the two kind of arms out there, the Eagle River area and the Girdwood area, to allow them to develop such things as the advisory fire board and other things. There could be, through this mechanism, a specific delegation of power. It does not say that that's what it's going to be, but it allows flexibility to the new government to actually give certain of its powers to that council. So it could be quite a structured form. And as a testimony we had, and I think Lisa provided some information that she could make available, it goes a wide gamut as to what a community council is, from the very advisory, really very little other than let you know that something's going to happen, to a pretty structured form. We're not saying what that structure will be this time. Question?
Question, volunteer.
Yes.
Roll call, please.
Carson?
Yes.
Reed?
Yes.
Sheffield?
Yes.
Bridgman?
Yes.
David?
You're on.
Yes. Shy?
Yes.
Fisher?
Yes.
Purple?
Yes.
Holmes?
Yes.
Jefferson?
Yes.
Carson?
Yes.
And Gary?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move
Mr. Chairman, since we have the entire commission here, before we move for adjournment, I would like to point out that this is our last scheduled business meeting for this week. As of Saturday of next week, we have on our schedule to have this thing out in college draft to the media. I would propose that the commission plan an all-day meeting next Thursday. A what? An all-day meeting next Thursday. I would submit that that is the only way that we are going to get the thing polished and ready to go to the press. We have not even begun the article on the mayor.
You successfully picked the AVA Marketing Association.
We have not even, well, it could be any day that people could meet on, but Thursday should be the last possible day to do this, because we have to do the transition section, we have to do the section on general provisions, we have to do something on powers, which we said we would put up at the beginning. We have to do all of the pulling together and stylistic changes that we feel might be necessary. We have to do the wording of 201 and 202, and we're not going to get it done unless we have at least an all-day meeting. How many people could make it?
Saturday, when did you say?
Thursday.
Next Thursday.
The 8th.
Okay.
How many people could make all day Thursday?
All good.
Could you move it up to another day? Thursday? Accommodate you another day?
How many Thursday? Count. Who's counting?
1, 2, 3.
Particularly, what day would be good for you?
I'll make it as much as I can on Thursday, and I can make it a lot of the day, but I can't make it so late.
How many could make it on Wednesday?
Well, I could, but I'd rather do it on Friday, so I'll vote for Friday too.
Jane, you can
I'm
make
saying I'll do that, check my schedule, but I'll do what I can.
That's my problem.
Why don't you just pick the day? It looks about the same.
Let's try Friday.
How about Friday? You can make it on Friday all day, or most of the day.
Only 1 hour.
I'm supposed to be making Thursday, but I'll try. Well, I'll do it.
Well, can you make it in Thursday?
I got a conference all day Thursday. It's been scheduled for about 2 months at 1,000 people coming to town, Florida.
That sounds like a very good
I'm
excuse.
one of the chairmen.
The other option is to have all afternoon Wednesday and all afternoon Thursday instead of all day one day.
That's a,
What about Thursday? What about a Saturday afternoon? This Saturday?
we're not ready for it yet.
This Saturday we can't do it yet.
Yeah, that'd be better with me.
can't work Thursday.
Well, let's do this Saturday afternoon and Thursday.
What's that again now?
This Saturday afternoon and Thursday. As
Saturday
much of
afternoon.
Thursday as we need after we do this Saturday
Saturday
afternoon.
afternoon is fine.
Well, Mr. Chairman, the only thing is, we had a discussion today, Rick indicated that he was prepared to go through to find out, make a list of just the areas where we have conflicts and where we need things. Huh?
I can do that in one evening.
Oh, well, it seems to me it would help structure the whole jolly thing.
Well, if we, let's do Saturday afternoon and as much of Thursday as we need.
What time Saturday? 1 o'clock?
Noon.
Noon? At the office?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Saturday you will consider the executive and the transition managers also. The two tables.
I'm sorry, but I have one other thing that I think we ought to make a vote on. And that is the service areas and the assessment districts, because these are very important to Eagle River and to Indian and Girdwood. Now, we have come up with another wording on it that is not before you. I'd be happy to read it to you. If I don't know whether they all had it on tonight or not, did they?
It's in the packet that you had on initiative and referendum that you got at the noon meeting. Those of you who are not at the noon meeting, maybe you can sign extra copies.
I think it's very important that we take action on this, in as much as this will be one of the contention points in those areas.
I really object to doing this at this hour of the night, and I don't think that handing it doing it tonight is going to in any way save our soul tomorrow night, and that I don't want to do it.
Would you object to having this version passed out for their, let them make comments on, is what I'm trying to get at. I think that the same ought to be...
I don't have any problem with that at all. I just want to know, like, are you going to take everything we've done and pass the whole thing out?
No, I think that these two particular sections are of particular interest to those areas, and I would like to have copies available so that if they're interested in making comments on them, they could.
Sure.
Point of order. That's all I'm asking.
Joseph, the motion to adjourn takes precedence and was made.
There was no second.
When do we meet tomorrow night?
Motion to adjourn is before the House. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And how do I get...
We might not, the commission itself might not agree among themselves, and frequently do. But we need the input to give us a broad base to work from, a broad base of information and feeling. If there are any other comments you care to make, we'd be glad to hear them.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming out on Friday night.
Appreciate it.
Tell you, it was a thrill. The trees are starting to change some color, and the mountains are beautiful. When do you want
About the end of May.
I'll get up to come to you. When you know about this council thing, whether or not you approved it.
We have we're finding that there are a lot of questions about it. I think before the first round, I imagine that there will be some changes in this one.
I don't know.
But we have approved for the first draft. That's what we approved.
Well, I don't know if we're answering your question. What's your question again?
This council thing that you have in mind that might be the better way to get input and to get...
Right, okay.
Now, we want to know, now you said you weren't sure yet. Well, when will you be sure? And if you have an alternative, we want to know what the alternative is.
We're going to be going to come out with the whole draft here about a week from now, or 10 days. It'll be published in the paper somehow. We'll get out papers the whole thing, but it's strictly the first go-around. Then we'll be holding public hearings on that, and we'll be talking further about this, and there may be changes, you know, when it comes out. Then it has to go to the vote on the charter. If the charter fails, of course, you know, the governments will stay as they are, and the present ordinance that set up the Turnagain arm would stay in effect. Okay, let's say that we do unify, bring it together, and we have similar wording to this. Your community council would still stay in effect, just like it is. It would go into the new government. But if you wanted it to do more and to have more powers, then you would have to work with the new assembly to broaden those powers. You wouldn't lose anything, but you'd have to work with them to create more, to give you more than the advisory status. But the way I see it,
Let's go. Here we are. Let's go.
What do you want?
I'd like to, I'm leaving town tomorrow. I'll be gone for 3 weeks.
Have a good time.
I shall.
See you later.
And Joe is your vice chairman. And I figured there ought to be a chairman pro tem. I suppose it's my prerogative to appoint one. I was going to suggest Mr. Fred Shy, because he seems to be around pretty much.
not always agreeable.
Always agreeable.
It's very disagreeable.
Promise to be agreeable.
Can we? Is.
Pretty sure it's not all the time.
Mr. Chairman, I so move.
Second.
Second. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed?
Opposed.
One opposed.
Roll call.
We have a noon meeting tomorrow at the office.
Right. Yes.
Is there anything else?
I'm not sure.
Where are you going, Mary? Bed?
No, I may be going to Juneau.
Really? What kind of fires have you got down there?
Hammond. You stay at
Hammond's clear.
Can I make you a reservation?
Mary, Mary, can I make you a reservation? I have to represent a competing alternate.
Which one's got the cheapest room? I'm on my own money this time.
Take one.
Who's got the cheapest room?
The Prospectum.
No.
Prospectum.
Is there anything else?
Hilton. And it's on Gold Street.
Chilton Charlie's here is up Turk Creek Road, just before the double bus room.
I guess the meeting is adjourned. I didn't hear you.
Okay, roll up the table. Take your microphone off the table.
Wait.